Good evening, everyone. The February 19th, 2025 Arlington County Board of Zoning Appeals hearing is now in session. Good evening and welcome. I am Richard Kaplan, Chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The board is made up of 5 citizens appointed by the Circuit Court. Tonight, in addition to myself, we have Vice Chair Inta Malice and members Judy Freshman, Portia Clark, and Carl McCroskey. To avoid disruptions, we ask that you please place your mobile devices in silent mode. Before we begin tonight's hearing, I will discuss this board's powers and the procedures for tonight's hearing. The board's powers are prescribed in the Code of Virginia and are set out in further detail in the county's zoning ordinance, adopted by the county board. The Board of Zoning Appeals does not have the power to rezone property or to amend the regulations set forth in the ordinance. That authority rests solely with the county board. This board does have the authority to do 3 things. First, the BZA can approve use permits that allow modifications of placement requirements for structures on 1- and 2-family lots where there is no option in the zoning ordinance to allow such modifications. In order to approve a use permit, the Arlington zoning ordinance requires that this board find that the proposal will not adversely affect the health or safety of persons residing in the neighborhood, will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood, and will not be in conflict with the purposes of the master plans and land use and zoning related policies of the county. In making these findings, the BZA shall consider whether that modification will promote compatibility of the development with the surrounding neighborhood because the structure's overall size, footprint, and placement are similar to those of the structures on the properties surrounding the lot in question, and whether the modification will help preserve natural landform, historical features, and/or significant trees and foliage. When approving use permits, the Board of Zoning Appeals may impose conditions that it deems necessary and in the public interest, including but not limited to the duration of that use permit. Second, the BZA can grant variances from the specific requirements of the zoning ordinance. When granting variances, the burden of proof is on the applicant to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, and the need for a variance would not be shared generally by other properties, and such variance is not contrary to the purposes of the ordinance, or that the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, or that granting the variance would alleviate a hardship due to a physical condition relating to the property or improvements thereon at the time of the effective date of the ordinance, or alleviate a hardship by granting a reasonable modification to a property or improvement thereon requested by or on behalf of a person with a disability. In all variance cases, the property for which the variance is being requested was acquired in good faith, and any hardship was not created by the applicant, that the variance granted will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property and nearby properties in the proximity of the geographic area, that the condition or situation of the property concerned is not of so general or reoccurring in nature as to make reasonably practical the adoption of an amendment to the ordinance, that granting the variance will not result in a use that is not otherwise permitted on the property or change the zoning classification of the property, and that the relief or remedy obtained through the variance is not available through a special exception process as provided for under the zoning or subdivision ordinance. Third, the BZA shall hear and decide appeals of the zoning administrator from any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by any other administrative officer in the administration or enforcement of Title 15.2, Article 7 of the Code of Virginia. In exercising its powers, the board may reverse or affirm wholly or in part, or may modify an order, requirement, decision, or determination appealed. The determination of the administrative officer or zoning administrator shall be presumed correct by the BZA. The appellant has the burden of proof to rebut the presumption of correctness by a preponderance of the evidence. The board shall consider any applicable ordinance, laws, regulations in making its decision, and must base our judgment on whether the administrative officer was correct. The concurring vote of a majority of the membership of the board shall be necessary to reverse any order or determination. Now on to tonight's hybrid hearing. For those who are participating in person, on the front table, you will find a QR code linking to a copy of the application package, including the staff report for each case before us this evening. For those participating virtually, a copy of each application package can be found on the Arlington County BZA website. There is also a link in the chat for the application packages. I recommend that if you have not yet seen the report for your case, that you review that report before your case is called. If you are attending virtually and lose connectivity, please reconnect with us by phone. If you are attending via Teams, please keep yourself muted and cameras off until called upon. Turn off the sound on any other device around you to minimize interference. When called upon to speak, please turn on your camera and unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located in the meeting command bar. County staff does not have the ability to unmute you. The meeting chat is active for technical support assistance only. The meeting chat should not be used for discussion, public comments, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All public comments must be shared verbally or have been previously provided in writing for the record during the assigned public testimony period. This evening, staff will call each case and will provide a brief staff report and recommendation. Next, board members will ask any questions of staff that they may have. Applicants or their representative will be given an opportunity to make comments to support the application or appeal. Next, all speakers for the item will be called. Speakers must fill out a speaker slip online or is available on the table in the front of the room. After we hear from speakers for or against the proposal, the board may permit the applicant a brief opportunity to clarify any points. The board may ask questions of any speakers, but does not permit any cross-exam or direct questioning by others. For tonight's hearing, this board has deemed the following time limits for speakers to be sufficient. 20 minutes for applicants of appeals, 5 minutes for applicants of use permit and variances. We have deemed 3 minutes for representatives of organizations and 2 minutes for individuals as sufficient. After the board has gathered all the information we need and have discussed the case, we will decide the matter by voting on a motion duly made and seconded. A majority is needed to approve any motion. Please be respectful of the time allotted. This is a public forum, and tonight's hearing will be recorded and posted on the county's website. All information associated with tonight's hearing, whether spoken or written, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. Any appeal from the decision of this board must be made to the circuit court in accordance with state law. After your case of interest is heard, you are welcome to stay for the balance of the session or leave at your convenience. Before we start the first item on the agenda, we have 2 administrative matters to address. Tonight, we have a board member whose last hearing is tonight. Ms. Clark has been a member of the BZA for the past 5 years. Which is longer than I have been on the BZA, and has been an integral part of teaching me everything I know about the BZA. And it has been an honor and a pleasure getting to know Ms. Clark, whom I had a pleasure of talking to yesterday. And when I asked her if she was looking forward to some extra free time, she told me that she was, but now she's decided to take on a few extra commitments to do good for the community. So on behalf of the BZA, we would like to present Ms. Clark with a token of our gratitude of her service with a little, I don't know, it's a plaque-esque type thing. And it says, presented to Portia A. Clark for meritorious service to the Arlington County Board of Zoning Appeals, 2020 to 2025. Thank you. Okay. Second item before we get to our agenda is that I believe we have a appeals that we need to schedule for a dismissal hearing. We have an appeal that was submitted on October 23, 2024, in which the county contacted the applicant that they didn't have any documents that made it to the upload in the application system. And my understanding, Ms. Ryan, is that the county has not heard back since then.
That's correct. We haven't heard back since December 17, 2024. Yeah, the applicant submitted on October 31st, but we haven't heard anything since we sent them comments on December 17th.
It's December 17th, 2024. So the application is still like complete. There's no uploads to it.
There are uploads to it, but we're waiting on them to. It's December 17th. Oh. Yeah, we're still waiting on a second application.
On a second application. So I think that this application is ripe to have them come in here for a dismissal for not not payment or not pursuing their appeal so that we can dispose of it. So I would like to seek unanimous consent to schedule ZPP 24-00016 for our March 19th hearing date. Hearing no
objection.
Hearing no objections, it's scheduled. Ms. Ryan, can you call the first item on our agenda?
Yes. The first item on the agenda, the BZA will consider adoption of bylaws for its internal operations. The bylaws were most recently distributed to the members of the BZA on January 20th, 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. 18 months ago, the BZA appointed Vice Chair Ms. Malice and myself as chair to serve on the BZA Bylaws Drafting Committee. Bylaws are important because they act as a framework that outlines how this board is organized and will conduct its work. They lay out our responsibilities as board members and the procedures for the parties who appear before us. Bylaws ensure that we operate in a fair, consistent, and transparent manner. The draft we are recommending documents to the best of our ability the BZA's process and procedures. To facilitate the development of our bylaws, the BZA engaged counsel, Mr. Krim, to prepare initial drafts. In addition, we reviewed the bylaws of neighboring jurisdictions, all of whom also maintain similar bylaws. And in March of last year, we convened a work session with county staff to collaborate on this final product. After much effort by the Bylaws Committee, we submit to you our proposed bylaws with a recommendation for approval tonight. Through council, staff has conveyed some lingering concerns with our bylaws, and as a result, we are proposing Amendment 1 to Article 5, Section 1. We did not incorporate all of the other recent comments. The proposed bylaws include a mechanism for making amendments if needed in the future, and if any parts prove unworkable, we can amend them at any time. But we believe getting bylaws adopted is important for the reasons I mentioned earlier, and we do not support further delays in approving them. Do my colleagues have any questions or concerns about the bylaws that were provided to you for review?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
does the county have any ability to make a statement? We'd like to make a statement.
When we're not quite there yet, but I was going to ask if the public or anyone had any comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, previous to this hearing, the Bylaws Committee distributed a list of mostly technical amendments in addition to the one amendment I previously discussed. Do my colleagues have any questions about those amendments? I would like to seek unanimous consent to alter the draft bylaws to include the proposed amendments.
No objection.
Thank you. Do any of the public wish to comment on the published bylaws prior to this hearing? Ms. Golsky.
Is it on? Yeah. Sorry. Mr. Chair, the county would like to comment. The county has expressed concerns to the BZA Council about the bylaws. Those concerns are that the bylaws go beyond the authority of the BZA. In many instances, those concerns have been explained to counsel for the BZA. We also have concerns that the bylaws contain legal conclusions that don't have a place in bylaws and are not appropriate for bylaws. We also note that it seems that the BZA, by the drafting the bylaws in the way they have, seem to wish to assume responsibilities that have previously been assumed by staff, and we're happy to discuss that and permit or do a reshuffling of responsibilities with the BZA. But I think it's more appropriate to do that in a format such as the work session, because the way the bylaws are written now, it's very, very confusing to staff. What is a staff responsibility and what is a responsibility of the BZA? And I think that the BZA has been very clear that the BZA has certain expectations of staff and wants staff to do certain things and doesn't want staff to do certain things. And I can tell you that on behalf of staff, we are very unclear about what those expectations are from the set of bylaws that we've seen. Now, I can say that I have not seen the amendment and have been not told that there would be any amendments, which I will say I'm surprised since I have spoken to your council and council did not inform me. So we've continuously expressed concerns. Yes, we were involved in the work session last March, but we had not heard of any discussion about the BZA's amendments or discussion of bylaws until after January of 2025. So we had no understanding that the BZA had any intention of discussing bylaws until we were told they would be added to the agenda. So there was no discussion since the March work session. And I did clarify it with council and we went through it and the ball was in the BZA's court to get back with staff and that never happened. And you can talk to your council, and that was confirmed by your council. So we've been really in receipt of the message from the BZA that the BZA seems to be wanting to make it clear what it expects, what it wants the role of the BZA to be and what it wants the role of staff to be. But we're not understanding from this set of the bylaws how that relationship, how the BZA would like that relationship to be set out. So we are asking for some clarity in that relationship from the bylaws. And we're just trying to express that we haven't really received that message yet.
Thank you. Ms. Malice, do you want to address any comments?
Sorry.
Did you want to address any comments? No, I'm so good as being a part of the. Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard. I mean, I'm happy to. I'm sorry. I was happy to jump in as well, but
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard.
Oh, okay, I still got the floor.
Oh,
I can do it. So I, as draft, as we had council draft and discuss with the attorney, or I'm not sure how that communication took place. My issue, I guess my concern is that there's nothing specific that we can respond to. Things that are beyond the authority of the BZA or legal conclusions that that we have reached and are not appropriate in bylaws. I don't know what those things are. So it's really not possible for me to react to those. From my standpoint, a plain reading of the bylaws simply is outlining what our current practice is. And so I don't see where there's any confusion about what the relationship is, because it really does reflect exactly how we operate right now. And so I don't, I don't know why putting in writing how we operate right now causes any confusion. It seems to me that it actually clarifies the situation. I would not be in favor of delaying the adoption of bylaws. This is my point of view. My colleagues may have other thoughts, because, we worked, I don't want to get into a situation where the perfect is the enemy of, what is it? The perfect is the enemy of the good. We have no bylaws right now. So if we adopt bylaws, we have a starting point. It's also very clear in the bylaws that they can be amended at any point in time as we find where points are not workable. So my view is that we should go ahead and adopt what we have. And then if there are specific instances where we think that where we agree that it's not clear to either party, that then we make amendments.
Thank you, Ms. Mellis. And I just wanted to echo that, in our, I think in our, all of us as a process in drafting the bylaws, our goal was to document the process as it has been working and as it is now. And I think there's very, very little, if anything, that has been changed to deviate from where we're going, just set a repeatable process to set the public expectation for, submitting applications to the actual hearing in the room. We drafted these with the help of BZA counsel, of our attorney, who has advised us that to the contrary of your opinion, that there is anything that is in contravention of state law. And even to the contrary, we're updating the remote policies to be in compliance with state law in various sections in our bylaw as well. Does anyone else have anything, Mrs. Freshman?
I'd just like to point out that not only do we not have bylaws, but this effort started at least 5 years ago that I'm aware of, and with various gatherings. And we did get to the point where we had counsel to advise us on what other jurisdictions do and how what we do differs or concurs. I'd like to keep it going. I think that because it's amendable, then if the county has specific issues that they raise and are persuadable, then we can certainly change it. But I think this has been going on for years, and it's apparently common practice for BZAs to have bylaws, and we'd like to be part of that.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman. If I don't hear any other comments, do my colleagues have a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Mellis?
I move the adoption of the Board of Zoning Appeals bylaws as amended this evening.
A motion by Ms. Freshman and seconded by Ms. Malice for adoption of the
The other way
amended-
around. Yeah, made by Ms. Malice.
A motion made by Ms. Malice, seconded by Ms. Freshman for the adoption of the amended bylaws. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Ms. Malice?
Aye.
Ms. Freshman?
Aye.
Ms. Clark?
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Ms. Ryan, can you please call the first case?
Sure. Case number V-1200824VA-2 carryover, a variance request by the Law Office of William B. Lawson on behalf of Elias and Lena Niemer, the owners, to permit a total main building footprint of 38.9% instead of 30% as permitted, and to permit a total lot coverage of 45.5% instead of 40% as permitted, regarding a new two-story rear deck addition to an existing one-family detached dwelling on a corner lot in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 2255 South Kent Street, Arlington Ridge. Staff recommends that the board defer the subject BZA variance request to the March 19th, 2025 BZA hearing. Please note we have one additional speaker who signed up.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Do my colleagues have questions for staff on this application?
I do.
And this is a deferral, right?
Right.
Yep.
And Mike,
Go ahead.
I just didn't see in the report a clear statement of why we're recommending deferral for this.
Sure, let me pull that up real quick. The applicant actually requested the deferral, so they revised their plans, and then the day after, they asked for deferral because they're waiting on an engineer report.
Okay. All right. I missed that, waiting for the engineer report.
Is a 1 month enough then? If they're still waiting on an engineering report and it's got to be reviewed by staff and re-advertised, is that enough for staff?
We have the plans, so I guess that would be up to the applicant for his engineer report. How long that will take?
I'm sorry, so staff has,
We have the revised.
so
plans.
staff would be ready to go then?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions? Would you like? Did you want to speak to it? Understood. Thank you.
So that's the purpose for that engineering report, is to address the drainage. It's not part of the application. Okay. Okay. Great.
And my understanding that the actual plan is still changing as a result, which we have not seen yet.
Oh, sorry. The only thing that changed with respect to the plans is the lower deck is now going to remain as is.
I guess we will look forward to seeing it if we defer it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from my colleagues, or just would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals defer variance V-12008-24-VA-2 to the March 19, 2025 BZA hearing.
A motion made by Ms. Malice, seconded by Ms. Freshman for deferral. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Ms. Malice,
Aye.
Ms. Freshman,
Aye.
Ms. Clark,
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes 5-0 for deferral. Ms. Ryan, can you call the associated use permit?
Yes, case number V-12009-24-UP-1, carryover, a use permit request by the law office of William B. Law, PC, on behalf of Elias and Lena Niemer, the owners, to permit a street setback of 5.1 feet to the decks instead of 21 feet to the decks as required from South Kent Street regarding a new two-story rear deck addition to an existing one-family detached dwelling on a corner lot in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 2255 South Kent Street, Arlington Ridge. Staff recommends that the board defer the subject BZA use permit request to the March 19, 2025 BZA hearing. And we have the one additional speaker, Christopher Hughes.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Any further questions? We've heard from, does the applicant want to be further heard from? Any motions? Or I'm sorry, and then we have a speaker. Does the speaker want to be heard from?
It's Mr. Hughes, the same.
Yeah, thank you. Motions? Anyone ready? They're looking. I know they're looking.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals defer the use permit V12009-24-UP-1 to the March 19th, 2025 BZA hearing.
Thank you, Ms.
I'll
McCroskey.
second.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. A motion for deferral made by Ms. McCroskey, seconded by Ms. Clark. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Ms. Malice.
Aye.
Ms. Freshman.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion for deferral passes 5-0. Ms. Ryan, can you please call the next case?
Yes. Case number V-12010-24-UP-2, a carryover and revised, a use permit request by Vladimir Kuvlar on behalf of Richard Dooley and Lisa Laramere, the owners, to permit a street setback of 19 feet to the porch instead of 21 feet to the porch as required, regarding a front porch addition with stairs to the existing one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 365 North Renata Street, Arlington Forest. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions, and note that we have 3 speakers that have signed up.
I'm sorry, 3?
3.
3. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Malice.
I am recusing myself from this item.
Thank you, Ms. Malice. My recollection was that we deferred this last month to make minor changes to the porch to lessen the ask of the BZA to be more compatible.
Yes, they reduced the width of the stair, so it's no longer greater than 35%
Right.
the width of the building, so now it no longer needs street setback relief.
One less ask, right? Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions for staff? Is the applicant with us?
Good evening, Richard Dooley, part owner of the house. Our thanks to the board for reconsidering this project and use permit request, which was deferred from the December BZA meeting. We reviewed the December meeting's recording and appreciated that you generally accepted the overall porch size and project scope, but we did recognize this BZA's request to return to this board after reducing the width of the stairs leading to the porch. As is noted in the county staff report, which we are pleased to see recommends approval of this use permit request. Since the BZA December meeting, we have reduced the width of the stairs leading up to the porch so that the proposed stairs are less than 35% of the width of the building elevation. Thus, we recognize the stairs no longer require setback relief via the subject use permit. In walking around the neighborhood and looking at other porches around Arlington Forest, we do believe that this porch design meshes nicely with other porches in our neighborhood. Lastly, on a personal note, I am hopeful to be able to see this project approved, having the front porch built so that on Sunday mornings I can break out the Sunday paper, sit on the porch, wave to our neighbors, chat with our neighbors as they walk by with their kids and with their dogs, picking up books from our little library in our yard and enjoying our porch. Thank you very much again for your time and attention to this agenda item this evening.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions for the applicant? Discussion.
I don't have a question, but I do want to state one of the standards for approval is consistence with zoning policy, and our zoning ordinance is consistent, although maybe it's not the greatest standard to have, but nonetheless, the standard is a 4-foot front porch, not 6 feet. And we regularly run up against this, and I regularly make my little statement saying that I won't support it because I don't believe it's consistent with the policy. However, it is true that most people want to put in porches of 6 feet these days, and so I think they're often approved by the BZA, but I'll just note that's why I'm not going to support this.
Thank you, Ms. McCroskey. Anything further? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
I'm sorry. Are you making a motion on the?
I'm sorry. We have speakers. I am so sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you. Is our first speaker available? Ms. Kirschner.
Yes, we're virtual today. Sorry, we weren't feeling well, so we wanted to be virtual today instead. Yes, so we are neighbors of Richard and Lisa at 361 North Granada Street. And we just wanted to speak on their behalf because we fully support their project. As someone who has lived next to Lisa and Richard, I believe this would be a positive enhancement to their property and to the entire neighborhood of Arlington Forest. This proposed porch is thoughtfully designed and does match the other architect in the neighborhood, and it does match other porches similarly on North Granada Street. The proposed dimensions are in line with those existing structures from what I can see as I walk through the neighborhood. And I do think this porch would provide, enhanced sightlines, neighborhood views, and property values to all of us living in Arlington Forest. Lisa and Rich have been wonderful, kind neighbors, and we have really enjoyed being homeowners next to them. Their commitment to following proper zoning laws and use permits demonstrates their respect for the county and the county's the county's rules. So we really do wholly urge the board to approve this reasonable request and allow them to build their porch. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Is Mr. Fisher available?
Yes. Good evening, members of the BZA. I'm here to speak in support of my neighbor, Lisa and Rich's use permit request for a porch at 365 North Granada. I've lived behind Lisa and Rich for some 20 years now, and I regularly walk the neighborhood, and I believe this addition would improve their property, particularly in our community generally. The proposed porch is nicely designed to complement the existing architecture of the home. I believe it will improve their family's quality of life by creating an inviting outdoor living space where they can connect with the other folks, such as myself, who walk by their house on a regular basis. I note that similar porches already exist on several homes in our neighborhood, including at 345 North Granada and 389 North Granada. Their proposed dimensions are in line with these already existing structures. The porch would not impede any sightlines or block neighboring views. In fact, I believe it would increase property values in Arlington Forest by improving their home's appearance and functional living space. To dovetail with the previous speaker, Lisa and Rich have been very considerate neighbors who have discussed their plans with me and all the other adjacent homeowners. Their commitment to following proper procedures by seeking this use permit demonstrates their respect for community zoning process and for Arlington Forest as a whole. I respectfully ask that the board approve this reasonable request that will enhance both the individual property and our neighborhood as a whole. Thank you very kindly for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Lastly, Ms. Alves?
Alves, thank you.
Alves. Thank you.
No worries. Yes, thank you for allowing me to speak in support of my neighbors, Rich and Lisa. We live at 370 North Granada, which is it's across the street, slightly diagonal. And I'm excited about their opportunity to add this porch to their home in such a way that will make it a livable, usable space, and also contribute to the value and the morale of the neighborhood, because I just think porches are wonderful, and if you're going to have a porch, it would be nice to have a porch that is usable and is inviting. It's inviting to the community, and the architecture or the design is such that it fits with their house, but with the overall the preponderance of houses in the neighborhood. So I just think it's going to bring a value to both them and to the neighborhood, and their land is certainly such that it could support a variance. So I hope that you will consider that, and I look forward to seeing their new and improved home and porch.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, now I think we are ready. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make it.
Ms. Clark?
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit B-12010-24-UP-2, subject to the conditions listed.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. A motion made by Ms. Clark, seconded by Ms. Freshman for approval as advertised. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Freshman? Ms. Clark?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. I'm sorry, Ms. McCruskey.
Nay.
Nay. Chair votes aye. Motion passes 3-1. Good luck with your porch, and I know all of your neighbors will enjoy it. The next one.
Yes. Good.
You
We'll
want
let
her-
them call.
Yeah. Does someone want to? Yeah, thank you. Can you call the next case, Ms. Ryan?
Yes. Case number V-12023-24-UP-1, a use permit request by Jason R. Enterprises on behalf of Don Estabrook, the owner, to permit right side setback of 5 feet to the porch base instead of 8 feet to the porch base as required, and to permit a street setback of 20 feet to the porch instead of 21 feet to the porch as required, with respect to a wraparound porch on an existing one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 6037 20th Street North, Highland Park, Overly Knolls. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions. And we have received supplemental material, including a neighborhood outreach petition with 3 signatures.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Ms. McCruskey.
Before the consideration of this item, I would just like to state that this property is diagonally across the street from mine. And although I believe I could participate fairly, in an abundance of caution, I am going to recuse myself from participation in this matter. So there's no question. So I'll leave.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions for staff on this application? If not, is the applicant with us? Come on down.
So I wanted to note that my most recent submission were 3 neighbors, but I also, with my original application, had 5 other neighbors. Okay, so I have a total of 8. Thank you for considering this. My house was built in the 1940s. My husband was actually born there. He's 76 years old. It's been in the family ever since it was built. And we've done lots of renovations, the roof, opened up all those walls inside so you didn't have all the little boxy rooms that all the Arlington old homes have. We have never done anything to the front entryway. It is a sagging piece of concrete at this point. The reason that we're asking for the setback to be from the street to be closer than what is normally required is because it actually then meets the front of the house. If we did go without a variance, the porch would actually sit back a foot from the front of the house. So that's why we're asking for that. And on the side, the reason we're asking for a little more room, because if we went with the normal requirements, I wouldn't even be able to open my screen door. We have a very walkable neighborhood. We're right by Westover. We have Cardinal Elementary School where my grandchildren who live with me attend. There's lots of people on the street. A lot of people already have existing front porches. We are just now getting around to asking for it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions for this applicant?
Yes.
Ms. Mellis?
So if I'm reading the staff report correctly and I'm seeing the drawings, your existing porch is actually set closer to the street?
We don't have an existing porch. We just have a stoop. We have concrete block and some steps.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have a porch. We have a side porch now. That is a side door from the kitchen. There is, and this would just be kind of replacing that exact footprint that's already existing there.
So all right, maybe I misread this, but I thought the staff report actually said that this was closer, going to be
It
less.
might be a little bit closer, might be a foot closer.
Okay, I'll look at that.
Yeah.
Well, if my colleagues have other questions.
I don't believe so.
Or I could ask staff. Did I read that correctly? That the existing
See what it
the
says.
setback's actually going to be less than what it is existing?
If you go back to your prior picture, you can kind of see it too. See the wraparound to the right. And the existing porch on the right side of the house probably goes a good 12 feet. It almost goes to the back fence. We're only going to put about this much. We're just going to go out and then the steps are going to go down from there to the back.
So the existing is at 10.3.
Miss Malice, to answer your question, the house sits closer than the proposed porch. So the
The
existing
house-
building walls are closer to the street.
Yeah, so the house itself is 13.1 or 10.3.
It's 19.7 feet from the front property line fronting 20th Street North.
Okay, because so on the left, it's 19.7. All right. Got it.
Thank you. Anything further from my colleagues? Someone like to make a comment or a motion?
I'll make it if they put it up. I move the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached proposed resolution granting use permit V-12023-24-UP1 subject to the conditions listed.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman.
I'll second.
A motion made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Clark for approval. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Malice.
Aye.
Ms. Freshman.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion for approval passes 5-0. 4-0. Thank you.
One recusal.
Ms. Ryan, can you call the next case?
Yes. Case number V-12024-24-VA-1, a variance request by Jaron Ballard and Jason Koswolski, the owners to permit a total lot coverage of 44.9% instead of 40% as permitted, and to permit a total main building footprint of 33.9% instead of 30% as permitted, regarding a one-story addition to an existing one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 2914 First Road North, Line Park. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution denying the variance. An alternative resolution conditions have been provided should the BZA see fit to approve the application as advertised. Please note we have an additional speaker that has signed up.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions for staff on this application?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Malice.
so the lot is slightly undersized. If the lot were conforming, would this application still need a variance?
Yes, they would.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malice. Anything further? Is the applicant with us?
Good evening. I actually have three supplemental exhibits. So I'll hand them to Brett over here to hand out. Oh, sure. Sorry, he had said to do that first. I am Brendan Ballard, and I'm the applicant. Brendan's my middle name, so Garen Brendan. And I'm here with my husband, Jason Kozlowski, our architect, Robert Burns, and our friend and neighbor, Linda Henderson.
Thank you.
All right, so it has been a what seems like a very long month for us. So I don't know about you guys, but I especially appreciate giving us some of your precious time and attention tonight. As you know, we are seeking both a use permit and a variance so that we can build a breakfast nook on our home in Lyon Park. I understand that this is a unique situation and that based on the staff recommendation, I'm coming to you as a major underdog, but I truly believe we have met the legal standard, and I hope I can persuade you. My husband and I are both federal government attorneys, and as a litigator, I sometimes need to work late and travel. We have found live-in au pairs to be a great source of dependable and especially affordable childcare for our three children. Further, both our fathers have passed away, so our mothers frequently visit for long periods. Finally, community building is very, very important to us. So we are constantly hosting friends, neighbors, and out-of-town guests for all sorts of parties, events, and other gatherings. When I originally spoke with the BZA staff, who have been extremely responsive and helpful, we were all under the impression that our porch gave us extra lot coverage allowance based on the certified plat that the builder obtained before we purchased the property, and therefore that some sort of addition would be possible with just the use permit. In October, the staff told me that I had provided enough examples of close properties with setbacks less than 25 feet that they would likely be able to recommend granting the use permit just based on those addresses, if you see Exhibit A. I suspect that when the staff changed its position on the porch in late December and made the decision to recommend denial of the variance, they also felt they needed to recommend denial of the use permit. So in their report, they came up with ways to distinguish the other properties. I did not personally find these distinctions compelling and strongly believe that BZA can comfortably find that the modification would be compatible with the surrounding properties. And if you'll take a look at Exhibit B, that is our block. And I don't know why, but the current, in your all's records, the footprint is, let's say, for instance, 2925. That house has been there. It's 8,000 square feet. It's been there for 2 years. But for some reason in your all's records, it just has the original footprint. Same with 29, 28. That one's under construction. I mean, the footprint is now built, but the house is not completed. Same with 102 Fillmore. And then also on the house next door to us, there is a porch that's only 18 feet from the back lot line, and that's been there about 15 years. So I did put this in my application, but I wanted to highlight it for you guys as well, because looking at these lots and these footprints, I think it, to me, seems very clear that we would meet the standard that the 10 by 13 breakfast nook we want to build conforms with these structures. With respect to the variance, as you know, a decade ago, the Virginia General Assembly loosened the statutory standard. As one legal commentator explained, it no longer includes the notoriously difficult to interpret undue and demonstrable hardship test that local boards of zoning appeals often struggled with. Whereas local boards previously may have felt a variance was warranted, but nevertheless denied the variance because it did not meet the strict requirements of the old statute. Now local boards have greater flexibility to grant variances when they find it appropriate to do so. In my view, the staff report applied the old standard and did not even address the unique aspects of our situation that we justification. In our case, strict application of the zoning ordinance, specifically the 40% lot coverage limitation for an R6 district, would unreasonably restrict the utilization of our property. Our lot is less than 6,000 square feet and only 50 feet wide, and the builder filled the zoning envelope without providing a space for informal dining. After 5 years of living in our home, we have found that the main floor would be much more functional for our family of 6, sometimes 7, if we had an informal dining area near the kitchen. The formal dining room is near the front of the house and cannot be viewed from the kitchen or family room. Thus, for breakfast, lunch, and quick family dinners, we need an informal dining space. Unlike we hoped, we have rarely been able to use the dining table on the patio due to cold winter months and lots of insects in the summer. And I ask if you guys could, since I have 2 applications, I assumed that I would have more time to address the 2 standards.
Well,
Can speak to your second later.
yeah, the use permit discussion will come after the variance. It's two different.
I just talked all about the use permit. I'm done with the use permit. Now I just moved on to the variance. I'm so sorry. I was trying to do it all at once because they're related.
You can keep going for a little, if you.
I'm almost done.
Yeah, quickly wrap up.
Okay. I'll be done speaking. Totally in 2 minutes. Okay.
Keep going.
Sorry about that. I had talked with Brett in
No,
advance
that's
and
okay.
told him this is how I was going to do it. So I apologize. If
So,
there
yeah, we always hear the variance first and then.
confusion.
And then the variance will either pass or fail, and then we'll act on the use permit next. It's because they're put in as 2 different cases for us.
Okay. All right. Well, I will finish. I am so sorry. I will finish my remarks. So unlike we hope, we've rarely been able to use the dining table on the patio due to cold winter months and lots of insects in the summer. Near the back of our yard, there's a huge white oak tree and another medium-sized oak tree next to it that cover the patio. In a stroke of bad luck, our youngest child has developed allergies to both oak trees and various insect bites, among other things, including cats. A few summers ago, we could not even go in the backyard due to the outbreak of oak mites and the especially terrible bites that the entire family got. And I have an article I cited too in my application. In the spring, there's a thick film of oak pollen covering the patio and dining table. And in the fall, we cannot keep up with clearing the leaves off the patio table for impromptu outdoor dining. Thus, enclosing part of the patio space to make it a space for informal dining will give us full use value on a daily basis. Unfortunately, strict application of the lot percentage coverage limitation to our small, narrow lot denies the construction of this indoor dining space that our family needs. We understand that other than the size and shape of our lot, our hardships are unique. A large family with no informal dining space and unusable patio space due to massive oak trees and our child's allergies. But under the law, BZA can and should consider these when determining that there is a hardship restricting full utilization of our property to grant the variance. Further, as documented in our application, we received overwhelming support from 11 of our neighbors, the only ones we asked, and the Lion Park Civic Association with no objections. We hope this will give you added comfort that by approving our application, you would be exercising your discretion in a way that is just and fair, not only to our family, but to all of your constituents. And as a final note, Unlike the use permit, which is based on comparing the request to neighboring houses and lots, the variance is based on the unique circumstances of each case. So there should be no precedential concerns here. For these reasons, we respectfully request that you exercise your discretion to adopt the BZA staff's alternative proposals with conditions that were advertised for both the use permit and variance.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions for this applicant? Discussion.
We're talking about the variance.
The variance.
Okay.
Correct.
I'll say that I'm having trouble contradicting the staff recommendation. I think it's pretty clear that this is simply over lot coverage, and another solution should be worked on.
Thank you, Ms. Malice. Anyone else?
Can I just ask a question of the applicant?
Sure.
Your current house is 2 stories?
Yes.
Okay. And
The addition would be 1.
would be 1. Okay. I'm having a hard time finding the hardship.
The state law requires us to make an affirmative finding in all variance cases. One of the findings we're required to make is that would granting the variance alleviate a hardship due to a physical condition relating to the property, and that it refers to the actual, not the house, but the lot, right? The actual
Right.
the actual lot,
Yes.
and or the improvements thereon which existed upon prior to the effective date of the zoning ordinance. So that doesn't really apply here because it's a newer house. So we're looking for a hardship on the property. And so is your assertion that the hardship is that it's a slightly undersized lot?
Well, my assertion is that it is a small, narrow lot, and the builder did not make space for an informal dining space, and that we had hoped we would be able to use the outdoor dining space as an informal dining space. But due to the topography of the lot, with the oak trees and the insects and our child's allergies, we really just honestly haven't been able to. And this is, 1 story, it's 10 by 13. It would incredibly, change and strengthen the value of our family and our everyday life. And so, that's why we're here making the request. And we do think that based on the standard, that is a hardship, and it is unreasonably restricting the utilization of our property.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Freshman?
I had a question first for staff, and that is there any configuration or square footage that would be acceptable? Because I'm not persuaded, I understand the dining issue, but typically we're not, how a property is used is not really our concern. So I'm sympathetic to the issue, but I also, and it's not, the size of the lot is not an issue at all. It's this width of the lot. And so at least in this case, they're looking to solve a livability issue without encroaching on at least the narrow part of the lot. But I didn't know if there was a square footage threshold that would be acceptable, or if any 1-story addition as in this location would not pass the test.
I can try to answer that. So right now it's already, with the way it's currently configured, they're already over in both main building footprint and lot coverage. So adding anything additional would continue to put them over. And even if they did have a 6,000 square foot lot, which is the minimum requirement for the R6, they would still need main building footprint and lot coverage relief.
Mm-hmm.
Or can I ask a question? For as proposed or for any additions?
for any additions? Because right now it's already.
Because
over.
of the change regarding the change you guys made regarding the porch.
Yeah, since there's floor space above the front porch, it doesn't count for the bonus.
But that's different than what's on the certified plat.
I don't, what was the question?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Oh, just the certified plat that we had received and that we had spoken with BZA, the staff with up until we were getting ready to do the hearing in December. We were under the impression that we had the extra 3% lot coverage. And then we were told that they had made a different decision. So I'm just letting you guys know that when I came
Yeah, so
before you initially,
I had a question
thought
about
I
that,
had
actually.
I thought I had some feet.
Well,
even
so I actually had, because I remember, I actually had a question about that. So your original certified plat, I assume showed that your porch was bigger than it was?
No, no, it is 60 by 10 or whatever, 60 square feet, whatever it needs to be, but they're saying that there is some living space above it, so it doesn't count.
Right.
Right, but I guess that wasn't caught on the plat, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Ms. Freshman, did you get your question answered?
Sort of. I mean, we've had a lot of issues with plats in the past, and a lot of it has to do with how old the plat was and whether it was computerized. So that, I mean, I can understand why a plat at the time of purchase may have not really been accurate when it comes to something as sophisticated as a matter of square feet, such as
Right.
we're dealing with now. But be that as it may, that's kind of like a builder who uses the entire buildable lot and doesn't tell you, so that when you go to put something else on,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman. Is there anything further from my colleagues? Would anyone like to propose an action?
Do we have what additional speaker that comes
Sorry,
after?
thank you. We have an additional speaker.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Ms. Henderson.
Good evening. My name is Linda Henderson. I'm a 44-year resident of Arlington, and I live diagonally across the street from Jason and Brendan. I just want to add my full support for this modest addition that they want to add to the back of the house. It's one story. You can't see it from the street. No one can even see it from any angle of the street. It will not be intrusive. It's not going to block any sunlight from anybody. And the addition will not change anything that I'll see from my window or anything like that. But what this will do, it'll enable Brendan and Jordan and their three kids, Jason, sorry, their three kids and their au pair to have a more relaxing, natural gathering place where they can eat dinner and be in the same room at the same time. Families that do so tend to have stronger positive family communication, and research has shown that children tend to grow up to be more confident, caring, responsible adults. When the Kozlovskis moved in, their children were toddlers, early elementary school, and booster chairs at the 3-seat island sufficed. But that's not the case anymore. The children are older and they're bigger, and it's a priority for them to be able to eat meals together, have a place to monitor homework, school projects, while their kitchen and family room, and to make it easy for their children to have friends. As a former BZA member, I've sat where you're sitting. I know that there are regulations in place for lot coverage, but I also know you have the authority to make exceptions for perfectly good reasons, including when the exception doesn't change the character of the house, have a negative impact on the neighbors or the larger community. This is one of those instances in which an exception should be made. Every neighbor on the street, neighbors on the other side of the fence on First Street North, as well as the Lion Park Civic Association, fully support both the variance and the use permit. They've articulated their requisite hardship, and that Brendan and Jason had no say which model of classic cottage that they would be moving. And it's hard to imagine when you have 3 little kids, what you might need 5 years down the road, and what the implications and consequences of that change mean, or the process it might trigger, such as what's going on tonight. So please do the right thing. Give them their variance, give them their use permit. It just seems it's a quality of life issue for them, and please your authority to go ahead and do that.
Thank you. Is there anything further from my colleagues? I mean, I'll just say that I just don't think that we can make that finding that the granting of this variance alleviates a hardship due to the physical condition on this property. The fact that this property has been built to the full extent that the zoning ordinance allows it is typically not a hardship that state law recognizes as that hardship. It's a hardship on the actual physical conditions of the lot. So I unfortunately don't think I could support this one.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Mellis,
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached proposed resolution denying the variance V-12024-24-VA-1.
I'll second.
a motion for denial made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. McCroskey.
Ms. Malice.
Ms. Malice, seconded by Ms. McCroskey. Clearly not on my A game today. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Ms. Malice,
Aye.
Ms. Freshman,
No.
Ms. Clark,
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion for denial passes 4-1. Ms. Ryan, can you call the next case, please?
Yes, case number V-12024-24-UP-1, a use permit request by Jaron Ballard and Jason Koslowski, the owners, to permit a rear setback of 16.9 feet to the building wall, 15.9 feet to the building eave instead of 25 feet to the building wall, 21 feet to the building eave, as required regarding a one-story rear addition to an existing one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 2914 First Road North, Lime Park. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution denying the use permit request. An alternative resolution with condition has been provided should the BZA see fit to approve the use permit request as advertised. And then we have one additional speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Do my colleagues have questions for staff?
I guess, just to clarify, without the variance, this use permit cannot be built out.
That's correct.
Is would you like to speak to the use permit application?
Sure, I did.
So again, I think this was a bit of an issue of the original thinking we had some lot coverage, but I mean, to the extent that you look at these things separately, which I think under the law you're supposed to, I think we very clearly, and your staff at one point very clearly said that they thought we'd met the standard. And then I'm looking at Exhibit B. So I don't know if what that gets me, maybe some point you'll change the zoning for the lot coverage. But I think we very clearly meet the standard, and, you know, this is supposed to be applying the law. So I ask that you do so.
Thank you. Ms. Henderson. Thank you. Colleagues, I mean,
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached proposed, resolution in case V-12025-24-UP-1 denying, gonna stop. This is a motion to, this is a motion to grant the use permit. Am I looking at the wrong one?
It's on
the recommended motion is for a denial for the use permit.
Pardon?
the one on the screen is denied.
It's on the screen.
The recommended is denial for the use permit for the variance.
Use permit, okay, sorry. I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached proposed resolution denying the use permit V-12024-24-UP-1.
Second.
A motion made by Ms. Malice, seconded by Ms. McCroskey for denial as advertised. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Ms. Malice,
Aye.
Ms. Freshman,
No.
Ms. Clark,
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion for denial passes 4-1. Sorry, not the result that you were hoping for. Ms. Ryan, can you call the next case, please?
Yes, case number V-12025-24-UP-1, a use permit request by Ronaldo D. Guzman on behalf of Amy and Jeffrey Irwin, the owners to permit a left side setback of 4.4 feet to the screen porch, 4.4 feet to the porch eave inside of 8 feet to the screen porch, 5 feet to the porch eave as required, and to permit total aggregate side yard width of 15.7 feet instead of 18 feet as required with regard to a new screen porch on an existing one-family dwelling in the R6 zoning district on a premise known as 4532 19th Street North, Waverly Hills. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Do we have questions for staff on this application? Is the applicant with us?
Is Ray not there?
Good evening. Would you like to speak to your application?
Good evening, Chair and Vice Chair and board members. My name is Ray De Guzman. I'm representing Amy and Jeff Irwin for this public hearing. And basically, the location of this particular proposed screen porch, covered screen porch, is on top of an existing patio. So the property owner would like to have the ability to enjoy that position to be in a three-season comfort. So basically, they wanted to have that to be enclosed with a covered and screen porch. The proposed 200 square foot of screen porch addition resulting into a 3.6 feet variance on the side setback. The reduction will not result in the placement of the proposed screen porch addition within front yard where the placement of such addition is not otherwise permitted in the yard. The existing building footprint and the proposed footprint does not exceed the allowable of 30%, and the total lot coverage does not exceed the 40% as required by the code. The 200 square foot screen porch addition is clearly a subordinate in purpose, scale, and use, and intent to the principal structure on the site. The proposed screen porch addition, we believe, is harmonious with the existing on-site and surrounding off-site development and preserves existing vegetation. The proposal may not adversely impact the use or enjoyment of any adjacent property owners through the creation of issues related to noise, light, air, safety, erosion, and stormwater management. The reduction represents the minimum amount of reduction necessary to accommodate the proposed deck on the lot. We have submitted in our application the consent of 5 property owners as required by the staff to be to have the neighborhood letter support, and that's already uploaded in the system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do my colleagues have questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do.
I have a question.
Ms.
If-
Brusky.
Go ahead and
What did you say about neighborhood comment?
One of the comment that made by the adjacent neighbor is to really redirect the downspout from.
But do you have copies of the
Oh, yes,
neighborhood
yes, ma'am.
support?
I do have 5 consent letter from the neighborhood.
Oh, do we have those copies?
No, I don't think so.
I don't believe we have those.
I would like to present this thing as the letter of consent from the neighborhood, if I may.
Yeah, and we don't have supplemental. So,
No,
no, we have
there's
no.
supplement.
Yeah,
We
we have
have-
nothing.
we do not have that in our record.
Okay.
And And in your testimony, did you say you were building the screen porch above something existing?
Yeah, it's an existing patio, a concrete
Existing
patio.
patio, okay,
It's a concrete brick patio.
okay.
And so when I look at the, one of the plat showing the house location, I can see where the proposed 10 by 20 foot is in purple, but this frame patio in the back, what is that? I mean, is that an enclosed porch also?
No, ma'am.
Pardon?
No,
No? Okay. What is it? It's just a patio?
just a patio.
Okay.
So we only have one set, so I don't know the best way to
You want to?
just, do
That's,
you want to just read off what? You can mark, just,
Can you just read off the addresses?
Yes. The addresses received are 4535 19th Street North, 1811 North Wakefield Street, 4529 18th Street North, 4528 19th Street North, and 4541 19th Street North. And can you repeat any of those?
Could you repeat the third and fourth one?
I had them a bit out of order after setting them down.
Sorry.
Streets. Okay.
I'm looking for 4528 or 4534.
Yeah, the adjacent neighbors, I think we're missing.
we don't have 4534.
No, that's the address. The 19th Street properties are 4528, 4541, and 4535. On 18th Street North is 4529, and on North Wakefield Street is 1811.
Okay, thank you.
so I just have a question because it seems like this wouldn't need a use permit if if the porch was, or the screened porch was built on the frame patio in the back. Was any thought given to that? Is there any reason it's not being placed back there where there's room within the setbacks?
The reasoning behind it is that there is already a sliding door access that runs into the concrete patio on the side. So by putting in this screen porch, covered porch, will just automatically slide into the opening.
Okay.
Any discussion with the board? Ms. Ryan,
Online, the homeowners have their hands raised.
do we have a speaker signed up for this, Ms. Ryan?
No, it's the homeowner.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Is it okay if I talk?
Well, your representative has already talked for you.
Okay.
Thank you. If no one has anything, did you have something?
no, I would just say she may be, do you want to respond to my question?
Oh, did you?
About why it's in
Oh.
this location?
Thank you.
Is there one?
Yes, so we'd like
Just
to open
Thank you.
openness in the backyard, and we also have existing vegetation that we'd like to maintain in the backyard without putting a porch there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just will say that I will plan on supporting this one. I think it's very rare when staff can provide two comparables that are adjacent, that have similar or less encroachment than this applicant is asking for. And so I think that it would be hard pressed to to not find compatibility with the neighborhood on this one. But that's all that I'll say. But I'll leave my colleagues to decide a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say on the neighborhood feedback, it appears, if I got the numbers right, that the next door neighbor at 4534 we don't have. However, that is not on the same side as the porch.
According to the owner, that property is under construction and no one lives there.
Okay.
And is that, am I correct? That's a less affected neighbor, right?
Well, on the sense that it's the opposite side,
Opposite side.
of the structure in question, yes.
Right. Would someone like to, Ms. Clark?
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit V-12025-24-UP-1.
Second.
A motion made by Ms. Clark, seconded by Ms. Freshman. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Ms. Malice?
Aye.
Ms. Freshman?
Aye.
Ms. Clark?
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion for this porch passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you, Board. Mhm.
Ms. Ryan, can you please call the next case?
Yes, case number V-12026-24-VA-1, a variance request by the Law Office of William B. Lawson, PC, on behalf of 734 North Wakefield Street Investment LLC, the owner, to permit a street setback of 32 feet from the center line of North Quincy Street, a 0 feet from the street right away instead of 40 feet from the center line of North Quincy Street, 25 feet from the street right away, as required for interior structural alterations to move an internal structural wall and other possible internal structural alterations to an existing non-conforming commercial building in the C2 zoning district on the premises known as 4030 Cherry Hill Road in Cherrydale. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the variance with conditions. Note there is supplemental material for this case, which includes a supplemental report to revise condition 1 to remove the reference to ramp and replace it with structure, and then we received 2 neighborhood outreach letters of support.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Any questions for staff?
Yes, I do. So is this a situation where nothing is changing, but it's interior alterations that have to have the variance approved because of existing condition, which resulted from at one point the county getting some of the property to build a road? Is that right?
Yes.
Like the Quincy Street?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the non-conforming street setback.
There's nothing changing about the setback conditions. It's just that to do the interior structural alterations, they need a variance.
That's correct for Article 16.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Mellis?
So this is not like Fairlington, where the zoning district requires a variance for anything that's done interior.
It's kind of similar to the Fairlington where there were non-conforming buildings that didn't meet certain setbacks or separation. So to do anything in structural, even an internal structural alteration, require them to get the setbacks.
Okay, so it is similar.
It has a similar, yes.
Because, yeah, I think there's a provision that says you can't make structural alterations without meeting the standards. And so in order to meet the standards, they have to get the variance approved when they make interior structural alterations. So it's really the same provision hanging us up with a different zoning provision.
So it's a different, so in this case, we can't say that it is as frequently occurring as it was in Fairlington. In Fairlington, it was so frequently occurring that the county board actually made a change to the zoning district. That change did not apply to this district for sure. And staff's argument would be that it's not sufficiently recurring that it would be practicable for the county board to make an to change the zoning ordinance.
That's correct.
Okay.
And especially since this is the first one in C2 that I can recall in 3 years,
Yeah.
I would tend to agree with that. Mr. Lawson.
We've already done your work for you.
I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
I said we've already done your work for you.
Oh. First of all, I just want to say that I've worked with Ms. Clark as a leader of her community and on this board. And a lot of years of working together, and I thank you. And I hope this isn't the last time we'll have an opportunity to work together. This, I wanted to share this. This was done in the 1960s when Quincy Street was put through, and it was owned by the Coomis family. And what I suspect, and I actually went in the land records and I was unable to find this. I think what happened is when they took it, they allowed the ability to go right up to the property line. And there were also some canopies put up and some other things of that nature. And so Mr. Normile has now bought it. It was the Essie's restaurant. Some of you all may have been there. A very successful restaurant. And so Mr. Normile has bought it, and he also does restaurants, and the community's looking forward to when he opens up and gets going. I predicted your question, Ms. Mellis, because I remember all the discussion about should the, this is a situation where you need a variance because it's commercial. And I'm only aware of one other similar situation where nothing changed outside, but there was an internal change. And that was a case that I think it was Evan Pritchard did several years ago in South Arlington. So to my knowledge, recently it's only occurred a couple of times. I don't really have a presentation. The staff has done their usual good job of presenting everything. And unless you have questions, I'll go ahead and sit down.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Any questions for Mr. Lawson? Question or a motion?
I'm glad to know that it's going to be a restaurant again.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Mellis.
I'd be happy to make a motion, but I just wanted to flag one of the whereas, one of the second whereas in the resolution finds that the strict applications of the terms of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict utilization. I'm not sure that that one applies, or does it? But I mean, it's not a big issue, but it just, it could be continued to be used in its current configuration. It just could not be altered. Or is that unreasonable restriction?
To me, it's unreasonable restriction because it prevents them from making any interior structural alterations.
Yes.
And the building can't go on forever like that, and it's not affecting. So I would support keeping that finding in there.
Then I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the variance V-12026-24-VA-1.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Mellis, seconded by Ms. Freshman for approval. I will, any further discussion? I will call the roll. Ms. Mellis.
Aye.
Ms. Freshman.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Next case, please.
Case number V-12027-24-VA-1, a variance request by Simeon Liu on behalf of 1955 South Kenmore LLC, the owner, to permit the construction of a new one-family detached dwelling on a property with insufficient lot width for development of a one-family detached dwelling in the R27 district, Green Valley. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the variance with conditions, and then staff has received one BZA comment form.
Statement,
Ms.
Mr.
Clark.
Chair. I am a member of the Green Valley Civic Association, but no longer serve as president. But I am in the neighborhood, and this is a neighbor of mine. And the neighborhood may be affected by the decision, but I am able to participate in the agenda item fairly and objectively and in the public's interest. I will provide the clerk with a declaration form required under the Conflict of Interest Act.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Do my colleagues have questions for staff?
I do.
Ms. McCroskey?
So, as I understand it, the variance here is needed simply to have a single-family house on this lot. And there's no other exceptions being requested for this one. They are building and replacing the single-family house with one that meets the setbacks and all for this lot. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're currently 48 feet in width and they need 50 feet in width for the zoning district for a single family.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Mellish?
So we have the variance request because the lot is insufficient to build a single-family home. But doesn't this already have an existing single-family home on it that was built in 73?
Yeah, so if they were to remove it, they couldn't build a new one single family because the lot width is insufficient.
I just wondered how that 1973 got built.
If I might add some history to this case, this was a lot that I believe was subdivided, and that was one of my questions, is because the staff report does not reflect that, but it was previously one owner for both lots, and when the owner passed away, the lot was subdivided, and 1957 was built another home that the 50 feet went towards. So they built that house within compliance, but then that left this lot because they took the driveway off. But it was not the current owner. It was a previous owner that did the subdivide. But that was my question for staff, why none of this was reflected in the report, which indicated that this nonconformity went back to 1919. Well, the subdivide was done in 2018.
But the house, staff report said the house was built in 1973.
The house at 1944 was built in I guess, and may have been built at that time. But the previous owner had a house on the other lot. And that's why I guess my concern in all this was, even with some conditions that when I was president of the Civic Association, there was some concern that the water line for the house at 1944 was on the house that was built in 2018. So none of this was reflected in that. Is there anything that even says those agreements were met in 2018 or 2019 when 1955 or 1957 was built?
All right, so 1950, so our case is 1957, I see.
1944.
1955.
Oh, okay, and 1957 is the other one.
And 1957, but there is a house existing on 1955 right now.
Yes, and that's being torn down, which is my other concern because it says it's going to be rebuilt on the same foundation.
It's not. May I speak? Sorry.
Let's talk to staff.
Hold on. Yeah, we'll get to you in a second.
Okay,
Let
thank
us
you.
finish our discussion amongst the board.
Roger
So
that,
again, my
thanks.
question is, how did the 1973 house get built if that lot existed in 1973? Or did it not? Did the lot not exist in 1973?
Yeah, the lots existed since 1944, I believe.
So when the house was built in 1973, there was more property included in the lots, and then it later got subdivided?
No, if you look at that whole strip of that neighborhood, all of those lots were about 48 feet.
Okay.
None of them met the 50 foot.
Right.
So would staff have not looked at what happened with the adjacent property in this, making this decision, or was that a consideration?
I think the adjacent property went for a variance application for the same thing.
Do we know that?
It's on the staff report.
It
Yeah.
was a case number V-11366-18 VA1 that was referenced in the report, but in the comparables.
Issue with these adjacent properties.
It might be useful if we get all the information out and hear from the applicant. And then we can ask questions of whoever is.
I guess staff just didn't look at 1957 at all for this report, or
Sorry, the 1957 South Kenmore Street granted a variance in June 2018. Is that the?
okay, so they did.
Yeah, under V dash 11366 dash 18 dash VA dash 1 in 2018.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The applicant, would you like to speak to your application?
Yes, sir. That'll be great. Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Liu. Well, Smith Liu is the legal name. I'm the builder for this proposed new house. We designed the house so that it fits in within all the setback requirement of the current lot. And as you can see right now, we're faced with challenge where the minimum requirement currently by code is 50, by zoning is 50 feet. We have only 48. Other than that, everything meets requirement. We have spoken with the neighbors to the extent possible. So we have, as noted earlier by staff, that we have received support from neighbor to the, if you look at the picture above the lot, that's 1947. We have a written response from them. On the other one, 1957, this the house that we were just talking about. That house was on the market actually when we were going through this process. So we met the owner, we left the letter with them, but never heard back. And across the street, we reached out to all the different neighbors. One of them didn't hear back. Another one is actually on the board, on the board of the review of zoning. So she said that she couldn't participate in this. And we own the other house. So the owner, well, not we, the owner owns the other house. So that's supported from him right there. We actually also reached out to the townhomes behind our property to make sure that folks in those units are supportive. We sent a certified mail to one of the units where we couldn't get a hold of anyone. And then on the other unit, we left a letter with the owner. However, they were also in the process of moving and we couldn't find them again. But in general, we have received support from the neighbors that we've spoken with. And this is our goal is to have a pretty straightforward build right here, right? From the design perspective, from the process where we will adhere to the requirement from the county, and we just ask for the possibility of building this one single family home on this lot. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Do my colleagues have questions for the applicant?
Got a question. I guess I know this is a variance versus a use permit, but there is some concern in the neighborhood about the water runoff and how it might impact the other properties once this is built over. And that there may be some concerns with the water there now. So is there any engineering studies or anything planned to determine if the water and the storm water management system is in place to mitigate any problems in the future for these homeowners?
Yes, ma'am. So when we were doing the grading plan, the civil engineer actually studied the soil and also studied the rainfall as well as the root profile. And to address the water runoff, we have built a planter box around the house to slow down the water dissipating. So these are standard practices that's being approved by the county, and we will be using that here as well.
Can I ask if that was a consideration for why this home is being torn down and rebuilt, or was some of the water issues not a challenge?
The water issue wasn't a challenge. It didn't come up in our engineering study. The main reason why we we want to pursue this opportunity is, as you know, this is part of the opportunity zone. So we want to help with moving, having some housing that's more. So we plan to support the population here by leasing this house, right? Because the cost can be quite high. So by having this house as a market rate, a new home will support that kind of approach for developing the neighborhood. And that's the main approach. So the driver behind demolishing the old home and then putting a new home is not driven by the water, but of course, water management, stormwater management is one of the main considerations when we do the grading plan.
Then I guess the other question then goes back to staff. Was there any records to show that the water lines were severed from one lot to the other when the 2018 variance was approved?
Staff doesn't review for those that are usually like DES reviews. So assuming that the house next door got an approved, already got an approved building permit, we assume as staff that that went to a process with the Department of Environmental Services for concerns about water.
Any further questions?
Not for the applicant, but
You do have questions for someone?
I'll just discuss, part of
Oh.
discussion.
So discussion with the board.
Okay. As the request and our action is to simply permits construction of a new one-family structure on this lot, is it necessary to refer to plans? Since we're indifferent, I mean, I don't want to adopt plans that we haven't really looked at because we weren't asked to look at any dimensions. Is it necessary in the resolution that we actually refer to drawings and state that it will be built with a particular footprint and setbacks? Because it says setbacks approved by the BZA may not be reduced from what is shown on the attached. So I just wondered if we need to examine those setbacks a little bit more closely if we're actually blessing them.
I guess I would not think that it's necessary, but I think it's useful from my point of view in that the setbacks on here reflect meeting the standard setbacks in the zoning ordinance. And I think it might be different if I don't know if I had a plan before me that did not meet the setback requirements and was going to fill up the whole lot on both sides, I might take a different approach. So I think it might be good that we keep those setbacks. I mean, I would agree we don't have to necessarily pin them down to these exact numbers if they were if they met the standards of the zoning ordinance. Exactly. That would be adequate. But to me, that is an important factor.
But I guess even with the setbacks, because at the front of the house, it's less than what's allowed. But I think that was because of the way the two lots were divided that it was approved. But on one side of this house, you can barely get a trash can down the line. It's that close to the line.
Right, but the new house will have bigger.
It's going to be built on the same foundation to the same.
No, the applicant said it wasn't.
Not?
Yeah, I think the applicant said it was not built on the same foundation. Is that true?
That's true. Yeah, brand new foundation that completely meets the requirement of the setback on all sides.
I would just agree with my colleague about including, if the plan is acceptable to the staff and they've looked at all this, I would rather see that built than have no reference and then have somebody come back later because they've built something that doesn't meet all the requirements, and we have that same song and dance of after the fact. So I think at least this gives us the parameters of, and the owners, what they're, if they're allowed to build, this is what they should build in order not to have future problems here or elsewhere in the county government.
Sounds like the owner's doing a lot of nodding and is committed to this plan.
We are committed. Yes, ma'am. Like the time it took for this plan, because it's under qualified opportunity zone, there's a certain time frame we have, and we have the design that meets all requirement, and we definitely are committed.
Can you show the design with the setbacks on the screen?
Oh,
yeah. Okay. And what's proposed here, is it showing the 6.2 is the setback on the right?
To the tank. Not to the wall. That's to the, I assume it's a water tank.
Yeah,
that's right. That's a detention, stormwater detention tank.
Not to the porch.
It's
Yeah.
10.1 to the porch, 9.1 to the eave.
The other side is 8.4.
Right.
Okay,
So that's conforming.
Right. So everything here appears conforming.
Okay.
So they can even show, if they zoom out, you can see the other there, the existing condition next to it.
But it, you are pretty close there, being, 8.4 on one and 10, not a lot of room for construction error.
Yes, sir. Well aware. I've learned the hard way.
You've done this before.
A couple, yes.
Can you explain though, in the two designs where you have the back and the storm sewer easement that's on the left? One design of the house is going back to the storm easement.
Planner box.
So that's why I wasn't understanding if that's just on the same foundation. Because this one goes back a lot further.
Where's the easement?
On the right, on the left, in the back. That one.
Oh,
The storm sewer easement on the next lot.
Yeah, the challenge with those properties is there's that easement runs all the way down Kenmore Street. And at the end of Kenmore Street, it's actually on top of ground. But we believe that there's been some substantial water damage and property damages because of new construction. And there's a new development just down the street from this on the same side that has 3 houses that have not sold because one is flooded and it's brand new. So some of the owners in that area were concerned with that issue.
May I respond to that?
Yep, please go ahead.
Absolutely. So as you can see on this plan view right here, we have taken a lot of precaution when it comes to stormwater management. There are 2 big planter boxes. These are pretty big. So these are meant to slow down the water runoff. And then we have a very sizable detention tank. The goal is to further reduce the flow rate onto the soil. We don't want to oversaturate the soil from the roof of this particular house. I've driven around. I think the county has done a great job in enforcing these standards. And we went through many iterations with the county reviewers regarding the design of these stormwater treatment facilities to ensure that we don't add on to the existing challenges in the neighborhood. If anything, we're going to improve the flow rate from the existing house where there is no stormwater treatment at all.
But then can you also explain building on the same foundation with the length of the house and the difference shown on these designs? If you should pull the other one over. See, the house goes to the retaining wall comment on the old plans, but on the new plan, it goes back beyond the sewer easement.
I'm sorry, I don't see the sewer easement that you're referring to.
On the left side of the screen.
Is that easement not on this property?
It's not on our yeah, this is not,
Okay, but show both designs, because you'll see the same reference on both, but where your house ends, it's a different dimension.
He's not building on the same foundation. They're removing the old foundation.
Okay,
He said that.
okay, I don't think.
right.
that's in the report.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
But he corrected it.
All right. That makes sense.
So that easement is not on this property.
That easement goes all the way down Kenmore Street.
Right. But it's not on the parcel that he's building on, right?
I don't see.
Yes, correct. The easement is not in the subject property.
Is it on anybody's property, or is it just, is it on the adjoining neighbor's property? Or is it
I think that easement goes
public
all the way
land?
down.
I believe it's on another property.
Okay. They have an easement. And is there a stormwater facility on that easement? Underground? Is that what we're talking about?
I mean, it's in right now it's on the adjacent property, but the existing, that 10-foot storm sewer easement is existing. But we don't review them. We don't have plans for them. That's being regulated by Department of Environmental Services.
But are you saying that easement does not run all the way down that strip of properties?
It doesn't show on this plat, but we can't, for us to be able to see that, it usually, it would be for us to get the full plan for that area from Department of Environmental Services. But for zoning perspective, an existing sewer, public utility or sewer easement, they can build on that. But as long as, once they submit an application for a building permit, the Department of Environmental Services will determine if they have any issues in terms of easements or like the sewer water issues. But zoning doesn't have any, we don't review them.
I guess my concern is for the existing homeowners. What happens once this is built and it's some result of the building that causes flooding in other basements or homes? Does this owner have any contingency planning to put in place so that that won't happen and leave owners with additional expenses?
Yeah, I don't think we can answer that for zoning department. Because that goes for, as long as, I think you have to meet certain regulations for building and Department of Environmental Services for them to even approve your plans.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Mellis.
Just circle back to the subdivision. So this non-conforming lot was created by a subdivision?
Ms. Malice, if I can, I think I'll try and answer that.
Sure.
So the existing lots on this area, originally in 1919 were parcel lots were like 24 in width. And then in I believe sometime in 1943, this particular lot were bought by a same owner. So they became one, what is existing right now. So they have a 48 lot with most of in this R27 district area, they're all non-conforming in lot width since prior to the zoning ordinance of 1950.
So it wasn't created by subdivision, it was created by joining two lots.
Because in 1919, all the lots were already divided, but at that time there was no zoning ordinance, so the lots were 24 feet in width.
Okay.
And then some other lots, they bought three lots. So they probably meet the now is it R6? Or 27, 50 feet lot width. But unfortunately, because the lot isn't under R27, even though the lot is existing prior to the 1950, they don't have an exemption on the ordinance.
But the subdivide was what was done in 2019, not 1990.
It was not subdivided. It was the lot right now is already existing in 1943. But the house was built in 1970s.
But the house at 1955 that subdivided these lots did not exist until 2019.
I think the only lot that was existing right now, it was the adjacent property that went for the variance in 2018. That was brand new.
And the variance was because it was 48 feet.
Correct. But all the lots that they have right now that are non-conforming to the 50 lot width was already existing prior to the 1950.
Okay.
If the discussions with the board.
I think the discussion is with.
So obviously would be extreme hardship if this lot was not buildable. So I do think it qualifies for a variance.
Motion?
Ms. Freshman.
I move the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the variance B-12027-24-VA-1, subject to the conditions listed.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Malice for approval as advertised. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Malice.
Aye.
Ms. Freshman.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
I believe the last use permit on the agenda for tonight, Ms. Ryan.
Case number V-12028-24-UP-1, a use permit request by Cook Bros on behalf of Matthew and Jennifer Yates, the owners to permit a left side setback of 8.2 feet to the building wall instead of 10 feet to the building wall as required, and to permit a total aggregate side yard width of 14.3 feet instead of 18 feet as required for a two-story addition to an existing one-family detached dwelling in the R6 zoning district on the premises known as 5855 15th Road North, Westover Village. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Questions for staff?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
There's a powder room on the side of this house, and it says it was built when the original house was built in 1939. Is that like verified? It just doesn't look from the photos and all like it was part of it looks like it was an add-on afterwards. And I'm just wondering whether, that's something that staff has assumed because it's been there for a long, long time, or do we know for a fact that that side addition was on the house?
You talking about the left side?
Yes. Yeah, the left side of the house. There's one of the reasons they're putting this addition on the other side is that this little bump out appears. That is a powder room, they say. And it says it was there when the house was originally built in 1939. And for instance, it's not brick, it's siding. It just looks different. That's what I'm just wondering. And if we don't have that information, it's not
Applicants
critical.
may know.
Pardon?
Applicants can tell you.
Ms. McCroskey, just to answer that quick question, staff usually do research for old plats to verify what has been existing prior to the 1950. But I think we haven't seen any on records. So if we can't find it, we assume that what is shown in the real estate, which is 1939, would be the original, unless we find any other building permits prior that are on record. But I don't think we were able to, so we can't assume that it was.
Thank you.
Added.
Is the applicant with us? Would you like to speak to the application?
Yes, I would like to thank the staff and the board for their time.
I'm sorry, can you introduce yourself?
Phil Blevins. My name is Phil Blevins, representative for Cook Brothers. The homeowners, Jen and Matt Yates, are also online with us virtually. Just thank you again for the zoning staff and the BZA for the reviewing of the application and preparing the application. We know a lot goes into both of these. So just like to thank everyone and point out that one of the main restraints of this project was, as the staff points out, an under 50-foot width lot in an R6 zone that has a minimum lot requirement width of 60 compared to the 50. So we are an undersized lot with with a very small existing footprint of the existing home. With the upstairs, there's existing 2 bedrooms. So any sort of addition really to this house would require a major access and kind of demolition of that one of those bedrooms to kind of generate access to any sort of addition created. Ms. McCroskey, to answer your kind of question, that is actually where the existing kitchen was located currently. That's where the powder room, I guess, where you were at, where the staff was questioning earlier. That's where the existing kind of kitchen is. So from all our research, it is part of the existing structure of the house from what we're looked at during renovate, like just site visits and such like that. So provide some information for that. And then, so what else is there? Minimum lot, yeah. And I think, yeah, as I said, any sort of addition would require major intrusion into that second rear bedroom. And part of what we looked at was that keeping the addition meeting the existing setbacks of the, and when you look at it from the front of the street, there's almost an aggregate of almost 20 feet. So we try to keep the impact and feel of the existing neighborhood in line with the zoning ordinance. And also just to kind of point out that on the rear of the property, 2 of the neighbor outreach wasn't done because those are large apartment buildings and kind of not the standard kind of single family homes that typically. And the neighbor to the right has reached out and spoke to the homeowner about their approval and support for the project as well. So, and we thank again the BZA's time and the staff's time for hearing the application.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for the applicant? Discussion with the board?
This project could be built by right if the lot was 60 feet? Is that correct? In other words, we're only here because of the narrowness of the lot?
Would that be for me?
No, I think that's a question for staff.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure.
I believe that's what the staff report said.
I believe so.
That's good to verify that.
Yeah, if their property was 10 feet wider, they wouldn't need to come to the BZA with their current proposal.
Definitely a hardship to have, even though this isn't a variance.
I believe that this is, the problem here is all caused by the narrowness of the lot. And I think they actually, the plan shows that they have attempted to keep this addition in bounds and with reasonable exceptions. So I would be inclined to support it.
Would someone like to act?
I would. Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Malice.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit V-12028-24-UP-1, subject to the conditions listed.
Second.
A motion for passage is advertised by Ms. Malice, seconded by Ms. Freshman. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Ms. Malice.
Aye.
Ms. Freshman.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes no. Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ryan, is the appeal the next item?
Yes, that's correct.
Let's take a 5-minute recess and we will
Everybody's
take up the
situated.
in the CO Roslyn zoning district on the premise known as 1001 19th Street North, RPC number 16-018-007 North Roslyn. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution affirming the zoning administrator's October 7th, 2024 response. It is not a determination and thus is not appealable pursuant to Virginia Code Section 15.2-2311A or able to be heard by the BZA. Note there's supplemental material for this case that came in. Appellants provided email response to staff report with attachments and photos. Received a letter and 3 photos from Donna Rudy and a letter from James Matthew. And then we also received 3 BZA comment forms, one from the appellants as well as 2 others. And we do have 2 additional speakers that have signed up for this item.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. I recognize some new faces. Can we do our appearances real quick and then we'll get started? So for the county, Ms. Baum. Hi. Hi. New face.
Kevin Black with the County Attorney's Office.
Thank you. And for the appellant?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the BZA. I'm Gifford Hampshire with the law firm of Blanking, Shipping, Keith, and I represent the Mr. and Mrs. Bowl.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Gifford Hampshire.
Hampshire, thank you.
Right, like the state.
If I think you can raise the podium up. There's a button to your right, and then it'll get.
Thank you.
For appeals, we typically hear from the county first, then we'll hear from the appellant, and then we'll ask questions and discuss with the board. So would the county like to present their case?
Sure, you can advance to the next slide. For the record, this is our Lobabaum zoning administrator. You can keep going till we get to the text. Yeah. So we would ask that the BZA consider what we believe to be a jurisdictional issue about this appeal at the onset. It's our position that the zoning determination response to the appellant's request was not a determination as referenced in the Code of Virginia. As a result, that response is not appealable, and therefore the BZA has no jurisdiction or authority to hear this appeal. Next slide. We believe the decision to reject the determination request was appropriate for the following reasons. The approval of site plans and site plan amendments are a legislative function of the county board, and to that end, the county board approved the site plan amendment in question, SPLA 23-00011 on June 10th, 2023. The zoning administrator has no authority to make a determination about the validity of the county board's legislative actions. Next slide. Further, the zoning determination response was not a determination. The matter in question, Site Plan Amendment SPLA 23-00011, was a matter previously decided. At the time the determination request was made, there was no pending application or relief or permission that could be granted regarding the subject property, only a request to consider a decision that had already occurred. Case law cited in our staff report affirms this position. There must be a pending application for specific permission or relief. If the response is not a determination, it is not appealable to the BZA. Next slide. To conclude, staff requests the BZA to rule on the jurisdictional issue of their authority to rule on this appeal. Staff recommends that the BZA adopt the attached resolution affirming the decision of the zoning administrator to reject the determination request, finding that the zoning determination response is not a determination, and finding that the BZA does not have the authority to consider this matter. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin for a few additional comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good evening, board members, and forgive me if some of this is repetitious, but just to add a few points and comments to what the zoning administrator has already said. The BZA cannot hear this case unless the zoning administrator's response letter is a determination, and clearly it was not. As to her authority, I would point out the fact that if the zoning administrator had the authority to determine whether the approval of the site plan amendment was in conformance with the zoning ordinance, she would have heard the matter in 2023. not the county board. She did not. She did not because it's the county board that has the authority to hear site plan amendments. The county board heard the matter more than a year and a half ago. The matter was never appealed, and had it been appealed, it would have gone to the circuit court. It would not have gone to the zoning administrator. It would not have gone to the BZA. Clearly, it can't be appealed to them now. Can a county board violate its own zoning ordinance? Sure. That's what the Virginia Supreme Court actually said in the Ranky matter, which both of the parties in this case cite to. But the difference in Ranky is that Ranky exercised their remedy to promptly and timely and properly appeal the board's decision to the circuit court. Further, I just want to address a point or an argument that appellants made yesterday in their supplemental letter that they provided. They said, even though the county board approves site plan amendments, once a site plan amendment is approved, it becomes part of the zoning ordinance. And at that point, the zoning administrator and the BZA are, and I quote, charged with the review of the result of such approval. Result was given emphasis. Again, I think in plain terms, this is just seeking an appellate review of the county board's approval. However, once a county board approved SPA or site plan amendment becomes part of the zoning ordinance, the zoning administrator and the BZA's authority at that point is to determine if something is not in compliance with what the board approved, i.e. if they fail to meet a site plan condition that was part of the site plan amendment approval, if it was non-compliant on its face, in this case, it was a 31.9 foot antenna that was approved, if they had installed a 70-foot antenna. So the authority then is not in reviewing the county board decisions to determine whether they have the authority to approve it in the first place, but only in interpreting, administering, and enforcing what was approved. Lastly, if the BZA decides that the zoning administrator has the authority to look at the same issue that the county board approved over a year and a half ago, and for which the circuit court itself no longer has appellate jurisdiction, and say that the county board's action violated the zoning ordinance, then the appeal process to the circuit court in site plan amendment cases is completely meaningless. I submit that the zoning administrator had no authority to do what appellants were requesting, which was to review the county board's approval, and thus she could not and did not issue a determination. Now, because she didn't issue a determination, the BZA in this case lacks authority and jurisdiction. So, thank you.
Thank you. The appellant. Mr. Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the BZA. I'm Gifford Hampshire, and I represent Mr. and Mrs. Bowl, Theodore and Georgine Bowl, who are here with me today. They are the owners of apartment 2501 in the Waterview at 111 19th Street, and it's across the street from the property where these antennas are located at 1001 19th Street North. The issues that are before you are as follows. Was the zoning administrator correct in rejecting a request for determination that the site plan amendment issued was in violation of Arlington County Zoning Ordinance Section 3.1.6.B.1? And secondly, was the zoning administrator correct in her inherent decision in so rejecting the request for determination not to determine that the site plan amendment was in violation of that code section? For the record, we have this code section before us, which is section 3.1.6.B.1. And it says quite plainly that mechanical penthouses, fire or parapet walls, skylights, radio towers, steeples, flagpoles, chimneys, smokestacks, or similar structures may be erected above the height limits herein prescribed, which we're talking in this section about building heights. But no mechanical penthouse or roof or structure or any space above the height limit shall be allowed for the purpose of providing additional floor space. The next sentence is critical. Such structures shall not exceed 23 feet. And the county attorney, as I have said in my correspondence, has correctly ruled over the years that the word shall is mandatory. It's not discretionary. And the Renke case, as has been discussed, stands for the proposition, and Ms. McCroskey and I were involved in that case 2 decades ago now almost, and that stands for the proposition that a county cannot violate its own zoning ordinance. While a county has legislative discretion in the passage of rezonings and site plan amendments, it cannot do something that it itself legislated it could not do. And that's what we have in this case. A site plan amendment, as I say in my papers, is in Arlington County pursuant to section 15.5.1 is Arlington County's version of a special use permit. According to that section, a use requiring a site plan approval is a special exception use approved in accordance with the incentive zoning process in and subject to the regulations of this section. Every applicant for a site plan approval shall file with his application a proposed site plan in compliance with Administrative Regulation 4.1. And if you all may know, that's quite a detailed procedure, very detailed. A site plan approval is amended. And if you look in the zoning ordinance at page 15.9, you will see an application process starting with the submission of the application, sufficiency review, schedule hearings, recommendation, planning commission public hearing, recommendations, county board public hearing, and then final action. So it's a very detailed proceeding, which involves public engagement and advertised public hearings. Our position, in contradiction to what Mr. Black just said, is that it does not matter how a particular provision becomes part of the Arlington County zoning ordinance. It can become part of the zoning ordinance by a legislative amendment to the underlying zoning district. It can become part of the zoning ordinance, as in the Renke case, as part of a map amendment or rezoning, or it can become part of the zoning ordinance, as it did in this case, by a site plan amendment pursuant to section 15.5.1, which I just pointed out. Once it becomes part of the zoning ordinance, however, it becomes inherent upon the zoning administrator as part of her power and duty under section 15.2, 2286, subsection 4. It says that the zoning administrator shall have all necessary authority on behalf of the governing body to administer and enforce the zoning ordinance. That means the entire zoning ordinance. It doesn't mean just part of the zoning ordinance. It means the zoning ordinance that includes the site plan amendment that has become part of the zoning of the property pursuant, in this case, to the June of 2023 action by the county board. We are not asking the zoning administrator to second guess, as has been suggested, the legislative discretion of the county board. But as Mr. Black indicated in his argument, what we are asking them to do, what we are asking the zoning administrator to do is her duty to administer and enforce the result of that action. And the result that we have here is an antenna that is 8.9 feet above where it should be, pursuant to the plain language of the zoning ordinance. And that is something that the zoning administrator has a power and a duty to say, is it or is it not in violation of the zoning ordinance? And we do not have to ask her to declare the action void, because that action, that conduct, or excuse me, that conclusion, that legal conclusion, results as a matter of law by operation of law, depending upon what the answer is. But what the zoning administrator should not be allowed to do is to avoid the question altogether. And Mr. Black argued that it's different somehow because the action is in the past and the county board has already acted. If that were true, it would make a mockery of the whole zoning ordinance, because every single part of the zoning ordinance is the result of a past legislative action by the county board. That's what happens. But once that is in place, it's incumbent upon the zoning administrator to say, are things in violation of the legislative limitations that the county board made in section 3.1.6b or not? The cases cited by the county in the staff report are inapplicable. The James case involved a case where the zoning administrator made a interpretation of the zoning ordinance that a consolidation of a plat would be allowed by the Planning Commission. The Supreme Court of Virginia noted that that was not the zoning administrator's purview. It was only the purview of the Planning Commission. And the only result of that case was to say that the zoning administrator cannot bind the county board, cannot bind the Planning Commission. It's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a past legislative act that has become part of the zoning ordinance. The Kawakowski versus Monroe case, I was involved in that case out in Loudoun County, and the Court of Appeals has ruled just recently that that there was no zoning determination in that case, even though in that case the neighbors, it was actually the owner itself submitted a formal application to the county on the county form, and the county asking a very precise question to the zoning administrator about whether a residential treatment facility would be allowed on the property. The zoning administrator studied it, issued a letter. The letter even had the appeal language at the end. The trial court and the Court of Appeals said that's not a zoning determination because there's no permit pending at the time. But it was, and therefore it's advisory. We have a very different situation here. We have not only an actual permit, but an approved permit. And the rationale of the Court of Appeals in the Kawakowski case was it was advisory because we don't know whether the applicant is actually going to engage in the use, because the applicant has not submitted a zoning permit application yet. They might engage in the use. There were certain conditions in the zoning determination letter that they had to do certain things. We don't know whether they're going to do those things. So it was the abstract or advisory nature of the zoning determination at the time that was critical to the Kawakowski case. So there's anything but an abstract situation here. We have approval. We don't have just a permit. We have actual approval of a building, and we have actual construction of antennas 8.9 feet above where they should be. So there's nothing abstract about it. There are no blanks the zoning administrator has to fill in about where these antennas are. And there's no question about what the permit said, because in the staff report, you will see the conditions that set forth that the antennas had to be built precisely pursuant to the plans that the engineers had submitted, and not otherwise, at 8.9 feet above where they should be. And it's also not like the Graydon Manor case. The Graydon Manor case, the Court of Appeals said that wasn't a zoning determination because all the applicant did was ask 28 abstract questions about the zoning ordinance without any sort of concrete application to the property through a permit that was pending. That's not the case what we have here. We have a very definite use that has actually been constructed. So there's nothing abstract or advisory about our court request. We're simply asking the zoning administrator to do her duty, to look at the situation, look at the actual approval in June of 2023, look at what got constructed, and render a determination, is that in compliance with the zoning ordinance or not? There's nothing more basic about that than under her duty to do her duty under 15.2-2286 subsection 4. We also ask you to reverse the zoning administrator for the other reasons that we set forth in our letter of February 18, responding to the staff report, out of an interest of governmental transparency. And we've attached their emails that we were able to secure through a Virginia Freedom of Information Act request. Emails between Mr. Gomez Acevedo and Allison Hellowitz, a real estate specialist at SmartLink Group. At the very beginning, these emails show at the very beginning of this process, Mr. Gomez caught this very issue. He responded, he said, I've received your information for which I'll be accepting, so you can pay your fees and move this case to review. But I am letting you know that the site plan amendment will be rejected by zoning for heights on top of the mechanical penthouse. And on that same day, Ms. Hellowitz responds that she had shared this information with the SmartLink engineers to see if they can adjust the heights. And later she responds to Mr. Gomez Acevedo that she had discussed with our engineer, and it is not possible to reduce the heights to achieve AT&T's coverage needs. She goes on to ask Mr. Gomez Acevedo, is there any way to move this forward with the design as is? And Mr. Gomez Acevedo responds to Ms. Helowitz saying, I pass this word on to my supervisor. I'll get back to you as soon as I get a decision. And on that same day, Mr. Gomez Acevedo writes Rosa Accord, zoning review services manager, as follows. I received the message from the applicant about the antenna heights, and she says that lowering the antennas will affect the coverage they need. The application is for AT&T, but Verizon also applied for another telecom app. And both companies will be sharing the platform and screening. And on January 6th, Ms. Rosa Ancor responds to Mr. Gomez Acevedo, I can run this by Arlova next week, the zoning administrator, but I think they are out of luck unless they request a height increase from the board. And on that same day, Mr. Gomez Acevedo responds to Ms. Ancor that I'll wait for your communication. I told her I'll contact her, referring to the SmartLink engineer representative, as soon as I get your opinion. On January 6th, Ms. Hemphill writes to Mr. Gomez Acevedo that my team had a meeting regarding the height restriction zoning comment. Can you please send us the specific ordinance that specifies the height restriction? And on January 9, Mr. Gomez sends to Ms. Hemphill, also a real estate specialist with SmartLink, a copy of this code section we're discussing tonight, section 3.1.6.B.1, and states that he hopes to get feedback from the zoning administrator because it has been escalated to her. On January 10, Ms. Helowitz writes to Mr. Gomez Acevedo to ask, have you received any feedback from your supervisor? AT&T is working on this project, and they let us know they received some comments. On January 10, Mr. Gomez Acevedo responds to Ms. Helowitz that there's a meeting scheduled later on today with the zoning administrator. This is on January 10, 2023. I'm hoping that a feedback will come soon. So then we have a period of time, the next spring in April of 2023, Ms. Helowitz writes a new planner. Mr. Gomez Acevedo is completely out of the picture now. There's a new planner. And all of a sudden, the problem with the height restriction is somehow resolved. Indeed, Ms. Hemphill asks the new planner, Mr. Sutherland, if only the new comment needs to be addressed, because current planning is still current planning is still showing from the previous view. And so she asks a bunch of questions, and then Mr. Sutherland responds the same day, only the new comment needs to be addressed. And you need to provide a new document with corrected pages showing the corrected building height clouded. Lastly, you're still on the agenda for June. So what seems to have happened here is that there was indeed, we don't know for sure, but certainly putting these documents together, it seems that indeed there was a meeting with the zoning administrator about this very issue. The zoning administrator made an opinion or made a decision, made a determination that somehow this issue was resolvable and that the application could move forward. And it did move forward, and it got approved. We don't know what happened, but our point is, in the interest of transparency of government, we know, in addition to the legalities of this, that the zoning administrator seems not to have had any problem making a determination about whether this application was or was not in compliance with this height restriction, to the point where the applicant did not have to address that issue at all in the April of 2023 application. So why is it that somehow now, after the application has been approved, that the zoning administrator cannot make that determination? Again, we're not asking the zoning administrator to declare a legislative action void. We're simply asking if a specific approval was or was not in compliance with a legislated standard by the county board that applies across the county to everybody. And if it was in compliance, why was it in compliance? That's all we want to know. We can argue about whether that was correct later. And again, if she determines that it was not in compliance, then by operation of law, we have the Renke case that says if it's not in compliance, then it's void. But we don't know that because a determination has not been made. The other thing I'd like to note, and you may be hearing more about this from other speakers, is that in the staff report, Mr. Sutherland, having now cleared the way for the applicant to make this application and move forward to the county board, without this comment that Mr. Gomez Acevedo had raised being addressed, has made a unilateral determination, as reflected in the staff report, that the normal public outreach was not appropriate in this case because he determined that there could be no negative impact. And one wonders how a planner could make that determination when there had been no public outreach. Because the only way you can make that determination is to talk to people, including the people who are next door, whose view that they've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for, maybe $1 million, is going to be obstructed. Maybe they might want to know about it. But no, a determination was made that no public outreach was appropriate and that the only communication was a publication in what? The Washington Times. For what? The public hearing itself. So what we have is no public outreach prior to the public hearing itself, and then the public outreach that did occur was only the bare minimum legal advertisement for the public hearing. And you can understand why my clients, who have paid a lot of money for a river view, woke up one day to see AT&T or Verizon installing an antenna in that view, and then they hired some lawyers to try to investigate this. So for all these reasons, for the legal reasons, for the interest in transparency in government, and for the fact that public outreach was not available, because keep in mind, Mr. Black talked about the fact that this wasn't appealed to circuit court. How was somebody supposed to know to appeal to circuit court in 30 days if they have no notice? How are they supposed to do that? This has all the indications of being designed so that members of the public wouldn't know about it, wouldn't raise a stink about it, because of the interest in cell coverage in Arlington County. And we hope we're wrong about that. But the only way to flesh this out is to let the sun shine. And the way to let the sun shine on this is to get a zoning determination. The first step is to know, are we correct that this is in blatant violation of a county legislative standard? That's the only way to get the sun in on this. And I believe I've said what I need to say, and I thank you for your attention. And I'm ready to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? Just on a very simplistic basis, how on earth does a zoning administrator determine that an ordinance, a zoning ordinance passed by the legislative body, the county board, how does the zoning administrator second guess that? Her job is to administer and enforce the zoning ordinance as written. And there's not she doesn't have the ability to say, I'm not going to do this one, I'm not going to do that one, this one's good, this one's bad. It's not, once this became the purview of the county board and they adopted the ordinance and approved it, isn't that the end of sort of her role in terms of, she doesn't then have a role to second guess that decision that the legislative body made.
I just disagree with that, because this is a site plan amendment, a special permit that could be granted under certain circumstances. And it was granted to allow an antenna higher than it should have been. And that's a matter that zoning administrators look at all the time. Is the approval that allowed this antenna higher than the county board legislated it should be, is that in violation of the county ordinance? It's a permit, basically. It's a special use permit that becomes part of the zoning ordinance.
Right. Doesn't a site plan passed by the county board have the same effect as is an ordinance?
It becomes part of the ordinance. But it's an add-on, if you will. It's an add-on to the ordinance. You have the underlying zoning district, you have map amendments, and then you have these special permits that can allow things to happen in the ordinance that wouldn't otherwise be able to happen. So the thing that was allowed to happen here was an antenna that should have been at 23 feet, but it was at 31.9 feet. And that is a violation of another part of the ordinance that the zoning administrator, and her job as administering and enforcing the ordinance, can investigate inconsistencies of approval. And that's just part of her job.
But she's also obligated to administer and enforce the site plan amendment part of the ordinance, right?
Well, to the extent it's lawful. But we have the Renke case, okay? I understand Mr. Black's point. Then the Renke case that you and I had together 20 years ago, that was properly appealed. My clients properly appealed that to the circuit court. I understand that point. But that does not mean that the zoning administrator loses jurisdiction to administer and enforce the ordinance that as has been adopted when we're dealing with a legislated enabling provision in the zoning ordinance. The Renke case held, and it was further narrowed by the Newberry Forest case, that what made it special in that case was this was an enabling provision. In order to be rezoned X, you have to be rezoned Y. That's you only get into the door, okay? So you can't even apply. In this case, the AT&T and Verizon couldn't even apply, as Mr. Gomez pointed out early, couldn't even apply for this because it exceeded the eligibility requirements, if you will, to get in the door. So it was illegal from the beginning. We're not dealing with legislative discretion here. We're dealing with an illegal application that somehow was smoothed over, it appears. So what we're asking the zoning administrator to do says this add-on to the zoning ordinance through a special permit was inconsistent with the enabling provision of the rest of the ordinance. And I think that that is something that the zoning administrator has a power and the duty to do under 15. So what we're asking the zoning administrator to do says this add-on to the zoning ordinance through a special permit was inconsistent with the enabling provision of the rest of the ordinance. And I think that that is something that the zoning administrator has a power and the duty to do under 15.2 2284-6. 2286 subsection 4, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Malice?
So another simple question. It appears to me that you have your answer, that the zoning administrator does not think that anything illegal or unethical or anything happened.
We don't have an answer at all. We have, I mean, we can surmise we have an answer, but what we have right now is a rejection of our request because on a legal basis, on a technical legal basis that we disagree with.
Why do you need further determination?
So we can see whether we agree with it or not. And if we don't agree with it, we can appeal that to this body and argue about who's right about it. But just to have the request rejected and not addressed whatsoever because of the reasons that Mr. Black and the zoning administrator talked about, that's a different kettle of fish where we can't even get into the door to talk about who's right because we don't have an opinion at all.
So can I ask a question from Ms. Vaughn? Is there a reason that you didn't that you couldn't just say the county board was correct in making that change? Or you can have your attorney answer that. Is there any reason that the county couldn't have just affirmatively said, we think there's no problem here?
The request was made to the zoning administrator, and the response was that the zoning administrator lacks the authority to do that. And that is the county's position. And so that's the same answer now. She does not have the authority to go back in time a year and a half, look at a county board, which was appropriate for the county board to do at the time, consider the matter. They considered whatever was presented to them in the application then. So it's important to point out that when we're talking about an application in some of these cases, we're talking about a pending application. That is not what we have here. We don't have a pending application.
Understood.
That's what existed at the time a year and a half ago. That matter was decided, and the remedy at that point is to appeal that, and that wasn't done. So the zoning administrator just simply lacks the authority to make that determination now. Again, it becomes part of the zoning ordinance, and the zoning administrator's role at that point is to enforce that part of the zoning ordinance, which is the approval. The approval is what becomes part of the zoning ordinance.
Understand that.
Yeah.
So is there anybody in the county that can say that the county board acted properly?
Again, there's nobody, it is not the zoning administrator's role to do.
I'm not saying, I'm saying outside the zoning is.
I'm not aware that anybody else has any authority. She doesn't have any authority to do it. I certainly don't have any authority to do it. The county board has spoken on the matter. It determined the case a year and a half ago, and that's, and again, the only body that could have questioned it or changed it was the circuit court on a proper appeal. And again, what the case was not appealed. They had 30 days to do that, and they didn't do it. And I just want to make one more point, if I may. In terms of the notice, clearly, I understand that the appellants aren't happy with the kind of notice or from what they perceive to be an insufficient notice. But counsel for the appellants is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood the counsel to say that we did the bare minimum legal notice. Well, we did. And again, if you want to challenge the notice, the opportunity to do that was with the Court of Appeals. And as I understand what appellant is saying here tonight, they're not happy with the county's process. That's something altogether different. This is a legal matter, and they have asked the zoning administrator to do something she frankly doesn't have the authority to do.
So to me, it looks like what the applicant, what you're looking for is a method to go to court to adjudicate this with the court, since you didn't have an opportunity the first time.
We think that this the avenue is available to us, and we need an answer from the one person in the world who is charged with making these kinds of determinations in Arlington County. As Mr. Black indicated, that is the zoning administrator. She has a very special role in the county, and she is charged with making these kinds of determinations in our view. And she's independent for that reason. She has a lot of power to administer and enforce the zoning administrator, which includes determining whether approvals were in compliance with the law or not. Keep in mind, there's a provision in 15.22311C that talks about the permits that are erroneously granted by people, and whether or not, I'm sure you all have encountered that provision before, but it says that, and it didn't always exist, but it used to be before that provision was enacted, that if you got an opinion from a zoning administrator or somebody else about a zoning ordinance provision and it was wrong, you're out of luck because the permit can be revoked. But the General Assembly came along and said that if an applicant relies upon that determination and 60 days goes by and they materially rely in good faith and change their position, then the zoning administrator can't change his or her mind. Well, that implies really that the zoning administrator has power more than just to enforce the zoning ordinance that exists. She can make determinations about whether what has been passed is lawful or not. Because otherwise 15.22311C wouldn't exist. So the zoning administrator certainly has power to determine whether certain things that were done were lawful or not that are part of the ordinance. And that's all we're asking for her to do here.
Could I just ask you to
Yeah.
address one other thing? Why, so you have said that there was a permit, an application before the zoning administrator, or you have said there was a permit or application, which was the site plan amendment application.
Site plan amendment.
But the statement that, the zoning administrator's statement that she cannot, she has no authority to decide whether the county board was correct in its action in June, I think it was June, is, that is not a pending application. It's not going to make any difference to anybody. So how, can you explain to me how you think that puts her in the position, or that is an application that is before her that would justify her making a determination that's appealable to this body?
I think the whole notion of there being a pending application with respect to Mr. Black is not supported by the case law. What the case law says is that, is there something definite that the zoning administrator can opine on? Is it abstract or not? Is it something that might or might not occur in the future? That was the case in the Kozakowski case. What we have here is something that was a past permit, granted, it's past, it's not pending. But it is something that is definite. There's nothing abstract about it because it exists. And the zoning administrator can look at the facts that exist on the ground and in the county board's approval and make a determination about whether those facts comply with section 3.1.6.b or not. And that's the only lesson, in my view, that comes out of that case law. It's not whether the permit is pending or not. It's whether there is something concrete that the zoning administrator can apply her judgment to.
And if I may, we're saying that there is nothing that she can do to affect those rights, and that's precisely the point. Sorry, that is why what she has said in her response is not a determination. Excuse me, that is appealable to this board.
So if the zoning administrator makes a determination not to make a determination, that's not appealable to this board. So
The decision.
right. I would think that that's not the argument to use. Otherwise, there wouldn't be no reason to have the state to have the BZA hear decisions or determinations.
The decision that her decision was not to make a determination because she lacked the authority to do so.
Right.
If any applicant asks the zoning administrator to go beyond her authority, she cannot do that, and that's all she said.
I believe we have speakers. Why don't we hear from the speakers and then we could regroup and see where to go. Miss Ryan, thank you. Mr. Ventrone?
Jim Matthews. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jim Matthews. I'm president of the Waterview Condo Board. We have 7 members of the Waterview community here. And the reason is we think that the issue is bigger than cell towers.
I believe Mr. Matthews is the president of the condo, so he is a representative of an organization.
Oh, Joe, do you want to go first?
No. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get you the amount of time that we have allotted. I think you get additional time because you're the president of an association. So you get a couple extra minutes. So I just wanted to.
It's 3 instead of 2 minutes.
3. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So I'm good.
They had it right. I'm totally wrong. It's 10 o'clock.
Actually, I'd like to start by just thanking all of you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board and staff. Having sat here through the evening, I can only imagine what it takes for you to do your work. And I don't mean that as just gratitude, but we really do appreciate it. And the reason we're here tonight is because we are residents of Arlington County. You're responsible in terms of what you do. And in this case, it really is about applying justice and fairness in terms of all the different regulations that drive the quality of life in this community. 3 things we'd like for you to think about. One is sitting in our home and waking up one day and finding that there's construction on the roof of the building next to us with no prior knowledge. There was no notice given. We have 3 members of the board here. None of us, we've served for over 6 years. We've never, ever had a trace of the notice of what was going on next door. So you say, well, how can you contest it? Like, we didn't know what was going on. And so one is to think that we're going to read the Washington Times. I mean, are you kidding me? And it really makes us suspect in terms of the true value of going out and getting a public response to that. There are not a bunch of buildings around. Ours is the building that's affected by that site plan. Two is we use the term tower. Folks, this is not a tower. This is a set of buildings on top of that office building, and you can look at it, and it exceeds the height limitation by 8 feet. There's no question about that. So when you say, well, does it obstruct the view? Yes, it did, because you actually have another part of that building that's gone up. The third one is this whole notion of site limits. We live in the flight path of Reagan National. We live with the planes that fly over, and we know that the reason for the restriction on heights is all about health and safety. So when you say that a building's going to be built and suddenly it's going to exceed the site, the limitations for height, we're not asking the question about whether it's legal or not. We're asking about whether it's safe or not. So this is a much bigger issue. That's why all of us showed up tonight, because we want you to understand that as you apply the rule of law here, that you also take fairness and you take safety and you take health in consideration. It's our home, and we feel like we've been compromised, and it doesn't feel very good. So we hope that we'll get your support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Ventrone?
Hi, my name is Joe Ventrone. I'm president of the North Roslyn Civic Association. I also will concur with my colleague, Jim Matthews, having sat here since 7 o'clock. Thank you for your service and what you do. I submitted a letter February 12th, but I'm going to read the salient points of the letter that I'd like for the record. Our position is clear. The apparent decision of staff not to require the applicant to notify and meet with the residents most affected by this proposal as part of the usual public engagement process was a serious misjudgment and oversight. The staff report for the June 23rd site plan public hearing shows an erroneous and uninformed decision by staff that the normal level of community engagement by the applicant was not warranted because there could be no adverse impact on the neighbors. Thus, the report states that the only community engagement was in the form of the bare minimum advertisement of the public hearing itself. And as you heard, it was in the Washington Times and not the Washington Post. As a result, the neighbors were deprived of the opportunity to voice their views during the 2023 site plan amendment process, both before and during the public hearing. The lack of notice that also deprived them of the opportunity to appeal the site plan approval to the circuit court within the required 30 days. We were shut out of that thing altogether. The North Roslyn Civic Association believes this lack of engagement is not only an error in procedure, but also a disregard for the concerns of the community. Moreover, the impacted residents were never notified that the 1001 block of 19th Street North would be closed for the commencement of construction on the cell tower. This lack of transparency only exacerbates the situation and demonstrates a continued failure to engage those who will be most affected by these developments. That was the only way we knew those cell towers were going to be installed. I came home Saturday and the street was blocked. I went to our management company and they said, we don't know what it's about. I'm on the Civic Association. We are usually notified when they're going to close a street for any work. So there was no notification. Moreover, I went to the building 1001 Potomac Towers. There was never building permits for those cell towers. I mean, this is the most mysterious development that I've seen in Arlington County. Finally, given the serious concerns regarding the lack of proper notification and inadequate level of engagement with the community and the negative impact on the residents' quality of life, we strongly urge the board to take the action set forth above and also ensure that future projects of this nature are approached with greater care and consideration for all stakeholders involved. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone have any further questions for any of the participants or speakers for that matter?
My clients, I thought he signed up to speak in the public hearing, and he'd like to be able to do so.
I mean, we generally he would have to share your time.
Doesn't he have a right to speak at the public hearing too?
He's part of the.
Well, he's part of.
Your application.
Okay, well, I believe I had 4 minutes left. I think I left 4 minutes on the table, if you could use those.
Sure, why not?
My name is Theodore Bohl. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this hearing today. My wife Georgine and I have submitted written comments, the main points of which I will summarize. Starting in December 2023, equipment for cell phone communications was installed on the roof of the Potomac Tower building right in front of the dining room and kitchen windows of our apartment in the Waterview condominium building. The two buildings are about 20 feet apart, not across the street. Potomac Tower has 2 roof levels, and equipment was installed on both levels. Enclosures placed on the sides of these cell installations, though not on top, form what I will call boxes. Within these boxes are a number of cell equipment structures. We were completely blindsided by these installations. We had received no advance notice whatsoever from the companies that built these boxes in front of our windows, AT&T, Verizon, SmartLink, or from the owners of the Potomac Tower building. The staff report supporting the site plan amendment adopted in June 2023 claimed lack of adverse impact to neighbors from either of the boxes with no basis, as there had been no effort to investigate any such impact. We included in our written comments a photo taken from our dining room window that demonstrates how wrong the staff report's claim of no adverse impact is. Indeed, that very staff report also contains a photo that shows part of one of the proposed boxes atop the Potomac Tower roof right in front of the Waterview, which exterior consists essentially of all windows. In January 2024, we filed a zoning complaint that the county dismissed. Our attorney found out later that the boxes are far taller than any allowable exception to increased building height would permit, 8.9 feet higher. We now know from a Freedom of Information Act request that county staff initially told the permit applicants that their request would be denied because of the maximum height limit for structures above the main roof. Staff asked if the boxes could be lowered and were told that was impossible. The matter was then escalated to the zoning administrator. A staff change was made, and the permitting path suddenly cleared for the companies to get what they wanted. Yet given all this, the staff report submitted for today's hearing proclaims in the very first sentence that its decision shall be presumed to be correct. Dealing with the county has been exceedingly arduous and slow. We don't have a legal department. We have marred views out of our kitchen and dining room, a reduced resale value for our condo, and have paid attorney's fees to finally get a hearing more than a year after we filed that zoning complaint the county dismissed. Let me add that the county staff frequently misspells our names and email address, despite corrections from our attorney. In this regard, I will correct for the record the current staff report. Our last name is Bohl, not Bowles, and my first name is Theodore, not Thomas. Last, allow me to say a word about the public interest. fire stations, police stations, subway lines, and yes, cell towers are not self-justifying in their locations and dimensions, but subject to administrative procedures to incorporate countervailing considerations and determine what balance is in the best interest of the public after public engagement. It is beyond us how in a densely populated setting, neighborhood effects can be so blatantly ignored. We were left in the dark about plans to erect cell structures on a neighboring roof just 20 feet away, and thereby prevented from raising objections to the site plan amendment and then appealing its adoption in circuit court within 30 days. We are now asking the zoning administrator for a determination concerning the site plan amendment as it relates to the zoning ordinance. The zoning administrator administers the zoning ordinance in all its components for the property that now includes the site plan amendment. The zoning administrator should carry out this responsibility and make a determination per our request. Thank you for holding this hearing and allowing us to present our case.
Thank you for your comments. In fairness, did the staff want to add anything extra as well? Thank you. Colleagues.
So I want to address what, again, looks like a serious failure of the public process, which obviously is disturbing. I don't know how we can make that right, or how the county can make that right at this point. We also don't know if the county board had the neighbor impact statements, what their decision would have been if it had made a difference. But I certainly have a great deal of sympathy for feeling that the applicant was not given an opportunity to weigh in on the decision when it was being made. Unfortunately, I don't think that that's our issue before us. Our issue is the determination whether it should have been made or shouldn't have been made, and I just want to get that point out before we discuss the other merits of the case. I'm very sorry for what has happened. The other thing is we don't have the power to fix that. This board does not have the power to fix the county's public process. That authority rests with the county staff, and the county board. Our authority is really just to look at the zoning ordinance and to determine, whether that's being followed or whether, the zoning administrator acted properly.
Thank you, Ms. Mouse.
I'll just weigh in with my view, which is that basically I agree. This sounds like it was poorly handled, and we don't have everything in front of us, but obviously things were not handled well in terms of public process, and Ms. Malice is correct that we don't have the ability, unfortunately, to to correct that process. And the question before us today is whether the zoning administrator's statement that she had no authority to review whether the county board's decision was correct or not. The question is whether that was a determination that's appealable to this Board of Zoning Appeals. And my general view is it probably doesn't meet the standards that have been developed in the case law. Generally, the zoning administrator is is tasked with administering and enforcing the zoning ordinance on behalf of the county board, not second guessing the decisions. And I do think that although Mr. Hampshire stated that he's not asking for this ordinance to be invalidated, it's essentially the same thing. And the review that's set up in the legal process for these passing a zoning ordinance as the site plan amendment is the court process. And it does have a time limitation. And it sounds like this may have been made impossible given everything that happened. But I think that is the process for that. And I do not think that that what's before us today is a determination that's appealable to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Thank you. Ms. Freshman.
I generally agree with my colleagues' comments. I think we have in the past, not so much in appeals, but in a lot of things, run into difficulties with public notice. And in the case of EHOs, with 30 days to appeal when nobody knows it's happening. And so I think the communication is between the county and the public is often challenging. But it's from what I understand, I agree with the comment about the determination or the absence of a determination. But I am troubled by the fact that I can't see what the remedy is for the people who have been damaged. And I don't know whether that means going back to the county board and, being obnoxious until they listen. I'm not sure what the process is, but it's very disturbing that something like this could happen, that there's no notice. I mean, all the cases that we have, there are at least notices put on telephone poles, and a notice is planted in the front yard of the building. I mean, just some basic stuff like that, as well as notifying the civic association and for street closures and other things, seem to me to be the absolute bare minimum that should happen, whether it's somebody building a shed or putting a tower on top of a building, to me. So I think the process has failed in this case. But I personally, of course, have no legal training and therefore no knowledge of what the options may be. But if this is all stemming from a board decision, then maybe it's the board that has to revisit it or in some way try to remedy the situation. I have no idea if that's even possible, but it's very frustrating to listen to the TikTok of the events and feel completely powerless to do anything about it. Nevertheless, I do agree with the statement that this was not a determination, that the zoning administrator did not even have the authority to do so. And so in that particular case, I think we can go forward with the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman. I'll echo the comments of my colleagues, and that I am definitely uncomfortable with this proposition that this action is now never essentially reviewable for compliance with the zoning ordinance and or the site plan amendments having the same effect as an ordinance. But I'm not sure where that leaves this board with a remedy, right? My uncomfortability is not reason enough for this board to take an action here. Although I would enjoy that to be the case. And to Ms. Malice's comment a little earlier about, this is about the applicant having a path to circuit court. Well, regardless of what action we take here, there's us rendering a decision will inevitably lead to a path to circuit court. And it gets slightly harder, right, one way or another. But I think, I think that that's the current path, right? Yes. To appeal our decision. No, sorry. Yeah, yes, right. And so,
But at least it would air the issue.
correct. And then, someday circuit court could say we were wrong, and maybe we'll have a determination before us, right? Who knows? Ms. Malice.
Did you want to speak?
No, go ahead.
So I am prepared to make a motion, but it's not quite the resolution as written. And let me tell you what I'm thinking, and then you can give me your input. The resolution has 1, 2, 3 whereases, and then a now therefore. The second and third whereases state that the BZA finds the administrator determination was not contemplated, and the next one says that that it was not a determination. In both cases, we're making a finding. I would therefore propose that the last whereas becomes the new therefore, and that we eliminate the last one, because I'm not sure how we can make findings and then say we have no ability to consider the matter.
I
Can I ask a question? In the reference in the whereas is to zoning determination response. Is that a technical term? The reason I ask is because you're saying a zoning determination response is not a determination. That to me is unnecessarily confusing.
We could just strike the word zoning determination and just call it the response.
Right. I think that's.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's.
I think that's a good point.
Making a bad situation worse.
So that would be my proposal if my colleagues agreed with that. So I'm prepared to make a motion. I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed resolution in the staff report with the following modification, that the third whereas eliminates the words zoning determination that precedes the word response.
And in the second whereas.
And in the second whereas, I'm sorry, in both whereas, the second and third whereas, we eliminate the word determination, zoning determination. And that the fourth whereas is modified to read, now, comma, therefore, the BZA finds that the zoning administrator's decision to reject the determination request was correct, and that we eliminate the existing now, therefore. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Can I just clarify? In the first whereas, you're getting rid of zoning determination response. Doesn't have to be the response or something is not a determination.
All right, zoning. It's that the zoning administrator's it's October 17th response.
It's not a, yeah.
Is not.
You leave response in.
Yeah, response state zoning determination.
And the same in the next one.
The same in the next one, that the zoning administrator's response is not a determination.
Right.
So we have an open motion from Ms. Malice and seconded by Ms. McCroskey. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I want to think for a minute about the last wording. Just because just because I'm wondering if we do need to decide that the decision to reject the termination request was correct, and therefore be it further resolved that there is no appealable determination to be heard by the BZA. I think that's maybe an important part of the resolution, that we find that the BZA is not, cannot hear it because there was no determination. So, Ms. Malice, I'm wondering if we can't leave something in there for the last paragraph.
So right now it says consider the matter. So we would have to have some other wording there because obviously we've considered the matter. To render an appealable response.
I'd leave it as it is.
So, Ms. Freshen, I'm sorry, did you say you would leave it as?
I'd leave it as it is. I think it's just saying at the end that we don't have the power or authority pursuant to the code to consider it.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the simplest way to do it.
Well, that goes back to my kind of conflict about making findings. If we're making findings, we are considering the matter.
Well, we did have to consider whether there's a determination. I mean, that was what was before us.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the last sentence because we're saying we don't have the power or authority, but we're not making finding as to expound on that. That's too broad for me. Right? We don't have the power or authority pursuant to 15.22309.1, but I feel like if we're making that finding, then we need a reason why. We need something to limit that to be more specific.
Right. The whereases say we're not, because there's not a determination. And that's why we don't have authority to hear the appeal. Because we've said, we found that it's not a determination, and that's why it's not something we can hear. Can I propose that the resolution that we adopt, wherever the zoning determination response phrase appears, we strike the word zoning determination and use just response. And then in lieu of the last two paragraphs.
I'm sorry, we have an open motion. So should we withdraw that and then we can consider a new one?
So let's hear your suggestion. And we can figure
So
out.
this would essentially restate it.
Okay.
Okay. But that I'm keeping the part that Ms. Malice put in there to strike zoning determination.
Right.
And then in lieu of the last two paragraphs, we say, now therefore be it resolved that the BZA finds that the zoning administrator's decision to reject the determination request was correct, and that the BZA does not have the power or authority pursuant to Virginia Code Section 15.2 2309(1) to consider this appeal.
It just seems like a contradiction.
Right. I mean, we are considering the appeal. Right. We are considering the appeal.
We've considered whether there's a determination. To me, it's like a preliminary matter, but
I mean, I think we have the authority to hear what we're hearing, right?
Right.
And
Right, so
Yeah, so.
I'm missing where you're headed. So maybe somebody else can suggest what we do with that instead.
So
So, I mean, I'm gonna just out of nowhere and shoot me down quickly, but BZA does not have the power or authority pursuant to VA Code 15.2-2309-1 to require the zoning administrator to issue a zoning determination letter in this matter.
that would be acceptable to me.
In addition to Ms. Malice's
Mhm.
changes.
Right. Right now, we have a motion, so we're working on an amendment here, so.
Mhm.
Or,
Okay. I can live with that, I think.
okay. So we keep the fourth section as a now therefore, as written,
Mhm.
and we add to that,
Well, drop to consider this matter and then add.
no, the third, oh, I'm sorry, the fourth whereas, we keep the fourth whereas
Yes.
Mhm.
as it is, and add to it. So rest was correct, and that the BZA does not have the power.
Oh, no, I propose to leave the now therefore be it resolved
Okay,
and
so
to
just tell me what.
drop consider this matter and replace it with
The BZA,
to require the zoning administrator to make a zoning determination in this matter.
does not have the power or authority to require the zoning administrator to issue a determination in this matter.
Yes. But I would leave VA code 15.2-2309-1.
All right. That's a friendly amendment. I'd accept that.
So do I seek unanimous consent?
Yeah, I think we've got it. It was a friendly amendment.
Okay.
There's
I'll
no,
second it, whatever it is.
it's just no objection.
Okay,
No objection.
with no objection. So with a motion by an amended motion made by Ms. Malice, seconded by Ms. McCroskey. Is there any further discussion?
Miss Freshman.
Ms. Freshman, sorry. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Malice,
Aye.
Ms. Freshman,
Aye.
Ms. Clark, Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes 5-0. We have some minutes to move approval. We have some minutes to move approval.
The minutes are from,
Do we have a second for January 2nd, 2025?
Second.
A motion made to approve the minutes from January 2nd, 2025, made by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. McCroskey. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Malice,
aye.
Ms. Freshman, Ms. Clark, Ms. McCroskey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion for minutes passes 5-0.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Malice.
could you refresh me on the stat? Where are we on the annual report? Did we file one for last year and now we're waiting for one this year, or are we still working on last year's report?
Thank you.
Does anybody know?
Yeah, I got filed last year. The one from last year got filed. I'm working on the one for this upcoming year.
Okay. And do you have any sense of timing on that?
Not yet. My friend Steven's working on it.
No, it's not a problem. If we wanted to communicate something, we could use the annual report, but we have other methods too. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to
Freshman.
let you know that March I will be traveling, so I will be remote.
For both or one, we have a work session in March as well.
I don't remember.
I think the 12th is our work session and the 19th is our regular hearing.
No, I'm here for the 12th.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Freshman.
Bye-bye.
The agenda having been completed.
I was waiting to see if anyone else wanted, to chime in before. The agenda having been concluded, this hearing is adjourned.